Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the regular meeting of Fernie City Council held at 6:31 p.m. on February 25th, 2025. Kiisuk Yukit. We acknowledge the city of Fernie is located within Kukinamakis, the unceded territory of Yakutat Nucleate First Nation. We recognize that we live and work within their vast lands. Akanahunik are from Yakutat Nucleate and are members of the Ktunaxa-speaking peoples of British Columbia, Idaho, and Montana. Before I call the meeting to order, a couple of things of note that tomorrow, Wednesday, February 26th, is Pink Shirt Day, recognized annually worldwide as a day to stand against bullying. It's an effort to create a more kind, inclusive world by raising awareness and funds for anti-bullying initiatives. And of course, as evidenced by the pins around the table, this week is Grizz Days, our a wonderful winter celebration and a municipally significant event. It starts on Thursday, February 27th and goes until Sunday, March 2nd with a variety of events, concerts, activities happening around town. And with that, I will call the meeting to order and ask for a mover and a seconder for the following staff recommendation that the agenda of the February 25th, 2025 regular council meeting be adopted. Moved by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor Shoesmith. Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. On to item 4.1, the minutes. And a mover and a seconder for the following staff recommendation that the February 11th, 2025 regular council meeting minutes be adopted. Moved by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor McIsaac. Any discussion on those minutes? All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. And 4.2, a mover and a seconder for the following staff recommendation that the February 12th, 2025 special council meeting minutes be adopted. Moved by Councillor Nixon, seconded by Councillor Shoesmith. Any discussion? All those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you. I'll now open the floor to public participation and invite the public in attendance or participating electronically who wish to comment on items listed on the meeting agenda in accordance with section 3.7.3 of the procedure bylaw to address council, except speakers must not address council regarding a matter for which a public hearing must be held or has been held pursuant to the Local Government Act prior to council's consideration of the matter or adoption of the bylaw. Speakers must not address council regarding a permit for which public notice must be given or has been given pursuant to the Local Government Act prior to council's consideration of issuance of the permit, and a speaker may only address council for a maximum of 3 minutes. And so I'll turn to Ms. Fetzko. Has anybody online indicated they want to speak? Seeing none, and for those at home, we have no one in the gallery this evening. We'll move on to item 11.1, the Mountain View Dike Phase 2 and Coal Creek Bin Wall construction tender. A report from our project engineer, Ms. Line.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. That went way better than it did last time I was up here presenting, so already going better. I'm here today to present the tender results and the next steps for the Mount View Dike Phase 2 and Coal Creek Bin Wall construction tender. The implementation of flood protection rehabilitation directly supports Council's vision of a resilient community because preventing flood disasters from occurring drastically limits the effects on our community. As this project is funded through a UBCM grant, not city reserves, it also denotes the fiscal responsibility of the city to obtain alternative funding sources to address known risks to our infrastructure. The project will continue the city's work to upgrade our flood protection and create a safer and more resilient community. staff recommend awarding the project to Vitae Environmental Construction Limited to further that goal, as recommended by the city's consulting engineers on this project, McElhaney. And just because I like to do this, we'll just do a little background on the Mount View Dike. So in 2019, the city of Fernie completed a flood mitigation plan. Mount View Dike was identified as the third priority project in the plan, and the Coal Creek bin wall was identified as the eighth. In 2020, the city undertook the Mount View Dike Upgrade Phase 1 project, which planned to extend the dike 315 meters to eliminate a gap in the flood protection and tie the existing dike to high ground. That project was $750,000 and was funded through this same grant. Only 220 meters of the dike was completed due to cost constraints, ending the extension just short of crossing Mount McLean Drive. In 2023, we used our own funds to complete the diking extension in Phase 3 and replace the undersized Mount McLean culvert that directs Castle Creek to the river. That same year, which is why this is Phase 2, and we've already completed Phase 3, we applied for and were awarded a grant for this work, which we originally applied for armoring and raising a portion of the Mount View Dike, plus bin wall and riprap rehab along Coal Creek. And we tied those two projects together because they came within the funding available, the grant, maximum $2 million. And also because of the 2021 atmospheric river event that really affected Coal Creek. And it was shown that the bin wall, we were more concerned about it based on recent activity. Last year, one of the first things to be done with that grant funding was a Coal Creek bin wall assessment. And that assessment determined that there were many more major deficiencies within those bins than was originally identified in the flood mitigation plan. To keep the project within budget, our focus was shifted to bin wall rehab and future-proofing the wall by building up the riprap in front of the wall. Thus, the Mount View Dike raising was struck from the scope of this project. This year, with the award of this tender, we are anticipating rehabilitation of the Coal Creek bin wall plus armoring of the Mount View Dike. To be completed in hopefully one future project is the final phase, which is the raising of two sections of the existing dike around the James White Park. So your options are as follows. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Engineer Line. Questions from council? Councilor Ramdass.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just looking at the tenders there, like there were about 5 or 6 bidders, and looks like we went with the cheapest, although they were yes on a lot of different criteria there. Was cost the only thing, or can you give us more picture on what led us to choose this particular proponent?
Please.
If I may. Thank you for the question. So we did have 9 bidders, which was actually extreme. And that was, we positioned ourselves very well by putting out the request for tenders end of December. So we were one of the first jobs out the gate. So we got a lot more tenders than we usually do, which was phenomenal. And this allowed for a lot more competition on all aspects, including cost. So Vitae is a new construction firm to us. And our McElhaney did evaluate the whole tender and compared it to the rest of them. And we also called and followed up with many of their contacts because they are a new firm to us and did get resounding approval from the people they've worked with, which is Alberta Parks, Swift Creek or Swift Current, but other municipalities. In the end, they were found to be the best proponent and also the lowest cost.
Further?
Thanks, Your Worship. Just is this like a class 2 estimate? Like, is it closer to what you think we'll be spending?
Thank you for the question, if I may. Right now, as this is the cost estimate they provided, I always put on a 10% contingency, but Yeah, so it's a Class A cost estimate.
Thank you, Engineer Lund. I'm curious, sort of a similar question, I think, or on a similar vein, like given the spread, and I appreciate in the report, there were some miscalculations in the higher bids, but it's a significant spread between the lowest and highest bid. Just to, I guess, reconfirm their references check out in such a way that we're confident they can perform the bid for their, or the work for their bid.
If I may, yes, I did discuss that with with their references, because this is in-stream work. As part of this, to rehabilitate those Coal Creek bins, we actually have to shift Coal Creek from where it is right now, which it hugs the bin wall, to the other side of the river, and do quite a lot of in-stream work. So we talked to the references about their experience with that, and we did get, I was checking those references and did get very positive feedback and similar experiences.
Thank you. And sort of a follow-on question, do we do all the permitting for in-stream work, or do they participate in that?
Our consultants did the permitting as part of their job.
Okay, so that's, the permitting is in place now?
Correct.
Excellent, thank you. And there is presumably, as part of that permitting, rigorous water quality monitoring in Coal Creek as we do the work?
Yes, there is.
Thank you. Just one other question, if there's nothing else from council. Oh, sorry, Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Worship. I'm just curious, and I'm going to put you on the spot. So we did the floodplain mapping in 2017. We got the flood mitigation, the Fernie flood mitigation plan in 2019, and that for us looked impossible. And really quite daunting. And I'm just, where are we at now? Can you maybe give us a percentage of how much we have completed of that plan? I mean, I'm kind of putting you on the spot. I'm sorry, but I'm just interested because it seemed really daunting at that time.
Thank you for the question. So like I said before, the Mount View Dike is the third priority diking project identified in the plan, and there is 8 specific diking projects, the Mount View Dike being third, and then the Coal Creek bin wall being 8th. So we have completed the first 2, and Mount View Dike, this is phase 2, or like the third phase, and the last phase being the raising. And so we're going to apply for grant funding for that in the fall. And we have also, council has approved the design of the 4th project with the 3rd Street Dike. And we're also planning to apply for that grant funding in the fall as well. So with the completion of this project, we're almost through the 3rd priority one, and we'll finish the 8th. So that's almost 4 out of 8 of the priority projects. So almost 50%.
Any other questions from council? Councillor Ramdas?
Thanks, Your Worship. Maybe this is not a big deal, but I just noticed that it was an engineer in training who signed off on some of the documents from the consultant. Is that common practice here?
If I may. So McElhaney, we do use, the engineer in training is our primary contact, but McElhaney has a system where they do have an overseeing engineer that reviews and approves everything that goes out. Nothing comes to us that isn't stamped by that reviewing engineer, and they all work within town.
Seeing nothing else, just one last question for me, Engineer Line, is just an observation from some of the work that was done on the annex dike. Is any disturbance is opportunity for invasive weeds. And I'm convinced, although I'm not sure, that we had some sort of agronomic species that we spread on the Mountain View Dike that lasted potentially a year, and now it's all oxeye daisy, like it's completely taken over with invasive. So I'm curious, or would ask, that we're cautious about tracking noxious weeds and ensuring we have a good indigenous plant seed mix that works for the region.
Thank you. I will, I'll keep that in mind. We do have a standard reseeding mix that is for the area. However, I will keep it in mind.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It was just an observation and I appreciate your attention to it. Anything else from council? So with that, I will ask our corporate officer to read the recommendation.
Your worship and council, the staff recommendation is that council authorises staff to finalise and award the contract for the Mount View Dyke Phase 2 and Coal Creek Bin Wall Rehabilitation Project to Vitae Environmental Construction Limited for $1,231,461.50, excluding GST, and that council authorises the mayor and corporate officer to execute all documentation for execution of the contract.
Moved by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor McIsaac. Any further discussion? All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Engineer Knight. Councillor McIsaac?
Thank you, Worship. I wanted to ask a question. This is only tangentially related to the project. And I'm not sure who this should specifically be directed to, but over the last number of years, we've had a number of conversations at the table with regards to the opportunity to go to RFP and so on early. This is the first example that I can think of that has been really successful in going out early and seeing a high number of bids and competitive bidding and so on going on, which seems to be the proof of the pudding that was the right way to go. And I just wanted to ask from staff, and I'm not sure who to direct this to best to, but how are we incorporating our knowledge of the success of this particular process into our budget and project planning in the future? Are we going to be able to get ahead and sort of stay on this track of early to bid, early to win kind of process?
Great question. Mr. Bornowski?
I've summarized some of the comments from the directors behind me, just increasing our year 2 and 3 and 4 planning and ensuring that we're doing design this year and bundling projects where we can so that they're a larger scope and so that they're designed earlier so that A, when grants come along and the fire sale grants come along, we have shovel ready or at least design projects to get in, and B, they're ready for budgeting and planning so we can get out to market earlier. It's just been a big focus of how we've been doing budgeting and project planning each year for the last 2 years now, and continue on that thread.
Thank you.
If I may add to that, I have 2 project examples. First, the reservoir rehabilitation that went out to tender twice. The first was at the end of the year, and we only got 1 very high bid. So we didn't award, and we went out early the next year, and then we got a bid that was more acceptable. Secondly, our road rehabilitation program, council awards the money for the design to be completed in the fall of the previous year. So this year in the budget is the request for the design money to do next year's project. So that design will be completed by the end of the year to allow us to position ourselves early in.
Thank you. With that, we move along to item 11.2, Official Community Plan and Housing Needs Report Contract Award, a report from our Director of Planning, Mr. Lennox.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So before you, I'm going to be speaking about the official community plan update and housing needs report contract award. So in terms of the RFP that we issued, we purposely, the way we drafted it was divided into 2 phases. So phase 1 consists of what the province calls the need to do a regular housing needs report. I talked about this at the regular or at the special budget meetings that we recently had. So this report would augment the data collected outlined in the interim housing needs report that was presented as a technical memo to council in a meeting we had in December. The regular housing needs report will augment that, and it will analyze quantitative and qualitative information about local demographics, household incomes, housing stock, and other factors. So this, the findings of that report will lead to policy and map schedule amendments to the current OCP. And as I mentioned at the special budget meetings, this work is legislated from the province and must be completed by the end of 2025. So phase 2 of the OCP update is not legislated by the province. So that's important to note, but staff feels that this is extremely important to complete, to provide a overall policy document to guide future growth and development, to assist council as well in achieving their strategic objectives and priorities. The OCP right now is over 10 years old. And I think it's, given the changes we've seen in the community in the last 10 years, it's time for robust, some public engagement component of that as well. So in terms of in general terms, there's going to be a technical review with the OCP update, issues identification, as I mentioned, community and stakeholder consultation leading to a draft OCP and ultimately a document that can be used to bring as a bylaw to create a new OCP for the city that would be adopted by mayor and council. So in terms of the RFP itself, it was issued in November of 24. There was an addendum that was issued by staff just to address a few questions that some of the proponents had. The deadline was in early December, and we received 4 proposals from 4 firms: Dialogue Architecture, Engineering, Interior Design and Planning, ISL Engineering and Land Services, McElhaney, and the V3 Companies of Canada. So all 4 of these proposals were reviewed and graded by members of the city's Interdepartmental Evaluation Committee. The committees, after they had reviewed each proposal, met and discussed their grading and confirmed that through a consensus and collaboration that the V3 had the winning proposal. So highlights of that proposal include that the V3 had their solid understanding of the project and its requirements, a detailed and robust work plan under which the project deliverables would be provided, a customized communication plan to ensure that it best suits the needs of Fernie, and also considerable experience in planning projects in smaller BC communities, including OCPs and housing needs reports. So some of these communities were Radium, Hot Springs, Canal Flats, Nakusp, Castlegar. All those were recent OCP updates. I spoke to one of the staff at Radium today, and they're very pleased with the way their process is going. Canal Flats got an honorable mention award with the UBCM. And Castlegar, Burns Lake, and there's also another one that Grand Forks that won an award with the both UBCM and PIBC that one of the planners with the project worked on. So in terms of budgetary considerations, the total cost of the project that V3 is proposing is $247,000. Just to remind council, it's important to note that there was a grant, the Local Government Housing Initiatives grant that was received by the city. That we received just under $176,000. Of that grant, we've sent a request to the province for $14,000 to cover for our RSS small lot zoning. Mm-hmm. So that gives us residual $161K from that, $1,000 from that grant. So in terms of phase 1, the housing needs report is an eligible report to be covered by that grant. So it's just over or $23,485,000. The procurement and kickoff, which would include developing a community engagement plan. That would also be covered by the grant. That's $8,800. So those are, things that the goal really is to go through the phase one for the 2025 and have the majority of the project covered by the grant. So that's what staff is striving to do here. So we're going to meet with V3 if council authorizes this contract issuance to talk to them about any other phase two work that can be covered by the grant that can be also completed in 2025. So this would include which I think should be done as part of the phase one, the OCP implementation, committee terms of reference and community member identification and appointment. And then any work that can be associated with the technical review of city documents, OCP audit and gap analysis and summary of key issues and recommendations. So again, we're going to be meeting with, if again, this is authorized for contract with V3 and identify as much as we can do or they can do in conjunction with the city that can be done prior to the end of 25. So that can be covered by the grant, provided that with each of those components of the project, there has to be a document prepared that's public facing, that's posted on our website so that the province realizes that we're making progress, and we can forward that to them when we ask for the reimbursement. So that's kind of the approach that we're taking. And basically the recommendation is that or the council authorize staff to award the contract to V3 Companies of Canada.
Thank you, Director. Questions from council? Councilor Nixon.
Thank you, Worship. So I guess my question is more, maybe it's a little bit crazy, but today I went to the V3 Companies of Canada website and found that it was predominantly an American company. And they have offices in Chicago and in Illinois, all over the place. And they only have one office in Sherwood Park, one in Canada. And I'm just wondering if it's franchise or if it's in light of what's happening currently, Maple Ridge is basically doing a new thing for procurement policies. Vancouver has prioritized Canadian companies. Surrey has canceled their order for portable bleachers, et cetera, et cetera. I'm just curious if this is an American company or a franchise. I know that they do a lot of work in Canada, and they're located in Sherwood Park, but do you know that? I'm sorry to put you on the spot. Mr.
Yeah,
Levick.
that's an interesting angle. That one of the proponents that has done most of the work in British Columbia is Blue Rock Planning. That's a company that's based in Okotoks. So they're like a subcontractor. When I mentioned the award-winning OCPs, that was the planner, Mr. Smith, that had done most of those projects. So they do have that firm that is based in Canada. And when I looked at the resumes, the project manager for V3 was based out of Calgary. And then the communications specialist is Canadian based as well. That's a separate company as well. That isn't associated strictly with V3. That's under their umbrella. But in terms of their corporate structure, I didn't delve into the specifics of that.
Yeah, that's a great question, Councillor. Looking at the conversation I had with you earlier, it looked like all the participants on our OCP were Canadian-based subcontractors under the V3 umbrella.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
As I mentioned, the communication specialist and the the planner that would be doing the bulk of the work, Blue Rock Planning is, like I said, Okotoks based.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Other questions from council? Councilor McGuire.
There we go. Thank you. I have a question. In the report, it's indicated that the sewer and water capacity for the small homes, area, et cetera, is outside of the purview of the report. It's going to be done separately, as I understood it. Did I read that correctly?
Yeah, I was expecting that question, so I didn't specifically get into that in my presentation. But yeah, I would say actually that we want to do them in tandem, and they're interlinked, big time, frankly. And the capacity analysis that I talked about, there was a $40,000 budget for that. That can be covered by the grant with the Ministry of Housing grant that I mentioned. So as I talked about at the special budget meetings, that'll look at the capacity constraints related to water and sewer. And again, if council awards this contract, we are going to meet with the manager of engineering and the ISL engineer to iron out or finalize the contents of that proposal. So that proposal just identifies constraints. What is important is that we have solutions to those constraints. And so we're going to look at doing infrastructure master planning as well. And so that would lead to schedules in the OCP that have some impact and meaning when the developer looks at them, because they're based on, that type of analysis. So we are looking at doing the infrastructure master plans after the capacity analysis is done, and those plans would look at solutions to the bottlenecks in the various storm water and sewer systems. So they are actually tightly interwoven with the OCP process, because there will be at least 3 or 4 schedules in the OCP that would be updated with a water master plan, sewer master plan, possibly a storm master plan. But most importantly, which is related to the housing capacity report, the need to do an updated housing capacity schedule. It's in Schedule T in our existing OCP. So that's based just on zoning. So that's problematic, because obviously, as we know, with certain sites, there's constraints related, and I've experienced it personally on some projects where there's been issues with gaining that type of density, because there hasn't, when they did the sewer and water capacity analysis specific to that project, it just wasn't there. And that's obviously a problem when you got R4 zoning and you can't go to R4 density. So that's the type of issues you want to avoid in the future.
Thank you very much that's a very comprehensive answer. Which answered most of the bulk of my question, which I didn't even get a chance to ask you. The one thing that I wanted to ask sort of further to that, and this perhaps might be a bit too philosophical, but it was interesting reading through the provincial government's sort of guidelines for the BC Housing Report and noticing that there's no risks section, right? So we have this whole potential plan for future growth of the community and so on. And we're busy looking at what the constraints are, but there's no way to communicate to the government that these plans can't go forward because there's this huge risk of capacity that we may or may not have. And does that get incorporated into the report to the province in some fashion, so that they understand, that we're in some places we're coming to the capacity thresholds for our systems? So though that growth, planned or not, won't happen without that change.
Yeah, that's a great question. I also want to add, and I didn't speak to, there's risks associated with environmental constraints as well. Like we talked about the flood protection, and the people that lived through the 95 flood with that bin wall know all about risks associated with the airport. So there's the OCP will look at this update. Will look at the hazards associated with, like I said, risk and flood, avalanche, steep slopes, refine our development permit areas in addition to the risks we've talked about with sewer and water constraints. So in terms of that, answering that question, Manager Planning and I were talking about this today. There is going to be sections on water and sewer in the OCP with policies. Like we do have that right now. And, you know, an important policy right now in our OCP is that we don't extend the boundary unless water and sewer is extended. I mean, that didn't happen in one situation when I won't get into, but, you know, there is certain sections of the OCP, like I said, the water and sewer that will have to be updated that can address just what you're talking about.
Mr. Boranowski?
Thank you. If I may further to that, the week before last and last week, I've been engaged with a number of colleagues, both at organizations like Urban Planning and Urban Systems, and also then with colleagues from other municipalities in the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. And they are aware of the constraints at the provincial level or at the risk of significant uptake and then infrastructure gaps. And there is a bit of a consortium forming because Fernie's not alone in having swaths of old neighborhoods that can't support fourplexes on every single family lot. And there are legal opinions floating about on what municipalities do and do not have the authority to do, but none of those have been tested. And so council can anticipate a bit of an update coming in the future as the larger and more well-resourced municipalities who are equally struggling with this bring forward some options, and some of those are tested, and we'll see what comes out of those. But further, once I get a handle on what the costs are in terms of joining a consortium who are working with a larger policy planning group, something comes back to council so that we can consider whether we want to dedicate some money to join that. But it is a shared and common pain point across all municipalities, particularly small municipalities, and not lost on the province either.
Thank you, Mr. Boranowski. Councillor Shoesmith.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. Pretty excited about getting this OCP completed and dealt with, so it's off the workflow. But you mentioned how that ties in with our water and sewer master plans, and Councillor McIsaac asked down that alley. I think that's super important, and I was kind of wondering what's the timeline on having those answers and those master plans in the works or completed?
Yeah, as I mentioned, we're going to, again, if this contract is awarded, have a meeting with the manager of engineering first and then with V3. You know, I'd love to see if it was possible to really focus on that in 2025 and then use the, again, the grant money to pay for at least the capacity analysis. But, you know, to give you a definitive answer in terms of timelines, we're going to have to see what comes out with those meetings. Meaning it would be a great scenario to amend our existing OCP, as I mentioned, to add all the policies related to housing and the schedules related to housing, and also to amend it to include water, sewer, and maybe storm master plans at the same time. You know, that would be nice and efficient, but a modeling, right? So that would be the best case scenario at the end of 25. But again, I'd have to, manager of planning and I are going to have to iron out those details with these meetings that we're anticipating in the next couple of weeks, hopefully.
Thank you very much. I'm optimistic.
Councillor Audie Kelly.
Thanks, Your Worship. Director, some of the things we do have to deliver by December 31, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Councillor Audie Kelly, it's legislated that we prepare that or prepare housing policies based on that housing, what they call the regular housing needs report that I mentioned. Those have to be submitted or for an OCP amendment by the end of the year.
Thank you. And
Further?
further, if you don't mind, Your Worship, I wanted to ask too about potential linkages or complements from the upgrade to the IICP and the upgrades to the OCP. Will there be any, like, well, that water and sewer analysis you're talking about, is that going to help us inform our capital plans going forward at all?
Director Heisler will help me out there.
Yeah, I'll jump in. It will help inform an element of the IICP, but long-term capital planning is also like almost a, that'll also inform the long-term capital plan, which will form the IICP even more. Like what we should be doing where we should be putting money away, where we should be collecting development fees for outgrowing our system.
So, sorry, just before you go, Mr. Heisler, so we can see a circumstance where we've completed the capacity analysis. We have potentially significant development and identified constraints that might force our hand in terms of the IICP. Is that a potential?
Through to council, that it'll help inform it, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, right now we have, not data-based proof on where we're having challenges in the system and suspicions.
Right.
The capacity analysis is step one of confirming those suspicions.
Right.
And then step two is starting to like lay out the projects and see where they start to fall.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. And Director Lennox, just so I'm clear, I guess it's further to Councillor McIsaac's question. The capacity analysis will advance coincident with the kickoff at the OCP so that it can then inform those schedules in the OCP.
Yeah, that's correct, Mayor
Okay.
Milligan. The manager in engineering is really wanting to get going with that one.
Okay,
Last time I spoke to her.
thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else from council? Seeing nothing, I'll ask our corporate officer to read the recommendation.
Your Worship and Council, the staff recommendation is that Council authorise staff to finalise and award the contract for the City of Fernie Official Community Plan and Housing Needs Report 2024 to 2027 project to V3 Companies of Canada Ltd.
Moved by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor Ramirez. Any further discussion? All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Director. Councillor McIsaac. Is this-
Sorry, Your
is
Worship.
this a trend?
I'm not going to make a habit of this, no. But what I wanted to say, Your Worship, is I just wanted to follow up on Councillor Nixon's point with regards to our awareness and sensitivity to political tariff issues and changing priorities, I guess, within municipalities and provincial government and federal government across. And I'd like to not drop the point, and I wonder if it would behoove us to add to a soon future agenda, a discussion at the council table about how we would like to see changes to our procurement policy and so on be addressed to reflect that ideology, or if at all.
Right.
I think that's probably worth a discussion at the table about whether or not we'd like to make some changes to that or reprioritize things or whatever to reflect those concerns.
Yeah, no, I appreciated the question and I appreciate the point. Any further comments on that? Councillor Ramirez?
I'm just curious, Your Worship, just following up on that, like if there were multiple bids on this, who is the closest one that was mostly Canadian and, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
we can perhaps look at, who came closest and if there is potential to award for a fully Canadian owned company, like what does that look like? That's a potential option.
Councillor McIsaac?
Yeah, thank you. And just to add on to that, I think that's why we need to have the discussion.
Yeah.
Like, certainly as I've been watching conversations and happen online, there's been a lot of sensitivity brought to the idea that, well, for example, comparing companies, one company may be fully Canadian, the other one has a head office in America, but has 10 times the number of Canadian employees
Mhm.
working at their factories in Canada.
Yeah.
And so all those considerations need to be taken into. And I think, I'm not sure that we need an overhaul of our procurement policy or anything, but I think it warrants the discussion and some sensitivity to it.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Councillor Hamilton?
I was going to bring up essentially the same point of, this probably isn't the time, but having that discussion, I think, at a future meeting of what our policy or what our ideologies are around procurement. Is it, to Councillor McIsaac's point, is it how Canadian is it? What does that look like? Yeah, I don't want to debate the topic right now and take us off our agenda, but
Yeah.
I certainly would support bringing this back at a future meeting in the very near future, hopefully.
Mr. Baranowski?
Thank you, Your Worship. Our procurement policy and our RFPs need to be really carefully tailored if we're going to start entertaining values-based procurement. Social procurement is a very real and mature, both in terms of practice and in terms of case law, area of practice. And so I just want to counsel that it's not as simple as saying, ooh, they're American and we'd rather go. And not that I'm suggesting you are, but there's quite a bit. Yeah, I'm not suggesting that's your suggestion, but
No.
there's quite a bit that goes into it. Further, I would anticipate some specific action coming from the provincial government in the coming weeks. And then further to that, FCM had a special British Columbia meeting last week or very late the week before, and has brought together national partners and provincial partners, including a number of municipalities in the provincial government, to tackle just this issue. So there may be some guidance and advice coming in the very near future that we can lean on as well. At the end, advancing social procurement will require direction from council and for us to set aside some pretty serious capacity to work on that, though.
Councillor Ramdass?
Thanks, Your Worship. Aren't we already doing that, CAO, with having 5% weightage for Indigenous businesses? So what did it take for us to put that into the language?
I think it would take probably a careful review of what trade laws we do and don't want to violate, to what degree, and what our comfort level is being the pilot fish in that school.
Yeah, potentially a fast follower versus a leader. I am curious though, if we have indications from higher levels of government that we are, it just occurs to me when Councillor McIsaac was asking that question, that granting will potentially be contingent on Canadian procurement. It's something we just need to be alive to. Okay, thank you. Good discussion. Thank you, Councillor Nixon, for raising it. Councillor Shoesmith, you had a comment?
I'll be really brief because I'm biting my tongue here. There's lots I want to say about this, but I relish the chance to talk it through formally at the table.
Thank you. Thank you. We are ready to move on to item 11.3, City Hall report, a report from the Director of Parks, Facilities and Recreation, Mr. Logan. And his new haircut.
Thank you. My wife cut it for me.
She does a good job.
Free. Good evening. The report in the agenda package includes detailed information related to City Hall, specifically an overview of the history, work completed, and remaining recommendations and improvements. Staff is seeking direction related to the repurposing of the old council chambers for employee workstations and to develop a budget and work towards completing the outstanding City Hall improvements as a future capital project. I can just go there. Oh, it's not up. I'm sorry.
No.
I have a presentation that's pictures. Sure.
Thank you.
Yep. Works. Well, that was the first one. I should go back there. Ooh, rocky start. So the presentation is going to recap the report and drive a council discussion, hopefully at the end, around the second recommendation, which is to create a budget and work plan for a future project addressing the outstanding issues. Please feel free to interrupt me throughout the presentation because it actually helps me relax. So a quick little history. City Hall was originally constructed as the Crow's Nest Coal Company head office in 1905. It was later donated in 1994 to the city and was named a heritage building or designated a heritage building at that time. So this designation requires that the exterior improvements conform with the form and character of the heritage building. Since ownership.
Sorry, Mr. Logan, here's your first interruption.
Yes, thank you.
Is that a designation that the city made or that the province made?
Maybe Mr. Lennox has information on that.
Director Lennox?
Okay.
Yes, the province.
It seems like the province designated that. Sorry, I didn't dig into those.
Last time about 22 sites in the ever designated
I see Mr. Simulini making his way up.
I stood up and then I'm like the kid that puts his hand up and then I know the answer as soon as the teacher addresses it.
Well, if you could
Yeah,
just
it's-
repeat it for the folks at home. so
No,
that-
it's Director Lennox was correct. So the City Hall is designated as a in the provincial register
Okay.
for heritage sites.
Thank you, but it's managed locally by our bylaw.
That's correct. So essentially we register it as a heritage site. So if you look at our OCP, I think it's Schedule C of the OCP has heritage sites that are actually designated and also sites that have heritage or heritage value or heritage significance. So they're delineated differently. So something with heritage significance, for example, would be something we recognize locally as having significance, but it's not actually protected. In order for it to be protected, it needs to be registered with the province.
Oh, thank you. That's helpful. Thanks. Sorry, Mr. Logan.
No problem. That was my phone a friend. So since ownership in 1994, the city has grown both in service area and population and has increased.
Sorry, Mr. Logan. Councilor Ramadas.
Sorry, Your Worship, I missed it. Schedule value and what's the other categorization?
Well, there's heritage significance that we
Yeah,
attach to something or a designated heritage building that the province is recognized as such by the province.
one is significance and the other one is value.
I believe so. Oh, here comes Mr. Simulini again.
Sorry, yeah, so there's
Okay.
heritage registrar or with the province. So it's actually registered as a heritage site with the province
Okay.
versus just sort of a local acknowledgement that it has heritage significance.
Okay,
And you could go through the steps of bringing something with local heritage significance through to the province to get it registered through something like a heritage revitalization agreement
Okay.
or a heritage preservation bylaw, things like that.
Thank you. Back to you.
So yeah, I was saying, since we owned it in 1994, staff has increased, the population's increased. Changes to the BC Building Code and occupational health and safety regulations have changed. These are some of the factors that have led to basically this report in front of council today. Projects have continued at City Hall. However, improvements have been limited to small renovations that don't trigger code, such as flooring updates, room refreshes, isolated abatement projects as a couple of examples. Council knows the council meetings have been relocated to City Hall or Senior Center, which has greatly improved the public access, although attendance at meetings remains low. The old City Hall Council chambers on the second floor is currently underutilized for the size and the space. And staff believes that enhancing this area could improve the functionality of various departments without triggering code requirements. Nonetheless, it's still necessary to review the existing building occupancy and its relation to its use. We'd also like to note and highlight that the council meeting technology in the room
in the senior center here will need to be replaced by 2028, making it an appropriate time to discuss the future of council chambers and City Hall once again. The list in front of you has been compiled from previous reports that contain all the outstanding issues at City Hall that we're aware of. Addressing these issues will require the expertise of professionals to develop a comprehensive scope and budget and ultimately execute the project on this scale. The professionals needed include architects, as highlighted in the building officials' comments in the report, mechanical and electrical engineers for fire suppression systems, electrical service and HVAC improvements. IT service providers will have to assess the existing network capacity and provide recommendations for City Hall's future needs, and will have to involve project managers, accessibility consultants, heritage consultants, and possibly more. It is essential to recognize the significant impact of addressing these deficiencies on City Hall staff. Work remains to determine the logistics of completing this project while city business continues. However, for the reconfiguration of space using council chambers, staff believe this can be accomplished with minimal inconvenience to the City Hall employees and be done throughout the year. Our city's staff mission and vision that were developed a little while ago. Our mission is to prioritize a healthy and respectful organization that enables quality service delivery. And our vision is of an inclusive workplace where people are supported, excited, and proud. Our City Hall staff were given the opportunity to complete a survey and provide comments. The comments were generally in line with and highlighted the need to complete the remaining deficiencies in City Hall. Survey questions and results are attached to the report. Council's values and strategic priorities align with and support the recommendation to plan for this project. So this was the part in the presentation I was hoping to get into some of the options that were presented in that older report from 2007. Keep in mind that is 18 years ago. So in that report in 2007, where it notes all those code deficiencies, they were trying to address the deficiencies, consider future growth while improving collaboration of the employees within City Hall. Although it is quite old now, the study, the need hasn't really changed. We still need to plan to address City Hall's growth and address building code, including accessibility. And in that report, LeBlanc offers 3 options for renovation and layout. And I'll go through them at a clip here. The first option has 2 versions. It starts on page 69 of the agenda package, and it minimizes the exterior alterations to preserve the heritage structure and uses the existing square footage in the inside. The basement's utilized for some offices. The main floor is reconfigured for a pass-through lobby with no accessible washrooms in public areas. The upper floor includes council chambers with access to all levels via an elevator and stairs. The second option, my preferred option, starts on page 72 of the agenda package, has a small exterior addition for the elevator and staircase, uses the basement for a few offices, and includes a spacious pass-through lobby with public accessible washrooms and council chambers on the upper floor, also accessible through the exterior elevator and stairs. Option 3 starts on 76 of the agenda package. It has a basement layout similar to the other options and includes office space in the basement. The lobby on the main floor is spacious, but doesn't include public washrooms in the design. Generally, the office layout in option 3 is much more spacious, with including council chambers outside of the original building footprint, but this would be by far the most expensive option. It would be valuable to understand what option the council would like to pursue as a basic direction to staff when developing a budget and work plan for a future project, if council directs staff as recommended. Which brings us to the recommendation. First recommendation is to enable staff to work immediately, developing a plan for utilizing the old council chambers, which can likely be completed with existing proposed budgets. And the second recommendation, however, is much more complicated and thus implies that staff will return with a more detailed report with information related to the timeline, scope, and budget in hopes of being a shovel-ready project in the future to
hopefully get some grant opportunities. And we know that there's some accessibility requirements that are at play right now, with plans being made for accessibility improvements in various facilities. So I feel like our provincial, federal governments might be releasing grants specific to accessibility, which City Hall, of course, needs improvements there. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take additional comments.
Thank you, Mr. Logan. Questions from council? Councilor Ramadas.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just curious, how much time will it take for you guys to put this all together, and what's the opportunity cost here if you're pursuing this versus something else?
Mr. Logan.
Through the chair, I heard two questions. The first one was how much time would it take to prepare the council chambers for staff, or were you referring to the larger project of renovation? Okay. Easy answer, I'm not quite sure. It's going to involve some investigation with our own internal staff. We'll have to sort of reach out, make phone calls, and get an idea on this plan in the LeBlanc. So I've actually phoned the LeBlanc partnership. They've changed names, the same number, different firm. I'm hoping that they can actually review this older report and potentially provide updated numbers or ideas to address some of the issues that we still have. Ideally, I'm hoping to have something back by the end of the year for a future project. Considering all the other larger projects in the hopper, I can't see us starting this, definitely not this year. But being ready for a grant in the future would be the goal.
Further?
Thanks, Your Worship. Why now?
Why now? I would ask why not 18 years ago, but there's a number of larger projects, as I mentioned, in the hopper. With the accessibility upgrades that are going to be basically mandated in the future, I think it'd be pretty strategic to get ahead of the game. That makes
So
sense.
the longer answer, it's coming eventually, or the building would have to be potentially decommissioned.
Yeah, I mean, that was a bad answer, I'm sorry. So we own a lot of facilities, and there was a list there of sort of previous competing priority projects. This, in my mind, I feel is the most logical next place to start on a project. We have staff in there, they're uncomfortable. The facility hasn't had a renovation since the 70s. We're sitting on a report that has a number of deficiencies, and it's no time like the present, I guess, is my answer.
Councilor Shoesmith?
Thanks, Mayor Milligan.
Couple things on this. Renovation of that scale, obviously, we'd have to line up some alternative workspaces for literally the entire city for like a year. So, I mean, I guess that's got to be in there. I didn't find that anywhere in there. Is that accounted for at this point?
Through the chair, yeah, I did note that logistics would be a big thing to consider on how that would work. I mean, in my head, obviously we'd have to take this back to the leadership team after some direction from council to discuss what that actually looks like. Courthouse across the street seems like a likely candidate. It's more or less empty other than court services in there. It has been used for staff in the past. It also requires an extensive renovation, obviously, but short-term pain, long-term gain.
Further?
Thank you, Mayor Millie. Yeah, it seems wise to be grant ready on this one, although I would point out that, as you alluded to, or well, said straight up, that we have a lot of other projects in the hopper. I think if citizens see us upgrading our own city hall ahead of another community center or ball diamonds or sewage or any of these other things, they might really question our priorities.
Councilor Nixon, then Councilor Audia Kelly.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, so, I read this report and it reminded me, like I looked at all those deficiencies and it just reminded me of that movie Money Pit with Tom Hanks and Shelley Long. So, and I see this as a big, big black hole, a project. I mean, I can agree with putting workstations and partitions in open spaces is a good temporary idea, but, after reading the report, it makes me think that the building's 120 years old. Maybe we should be looking at what Roslyn has done and putting in a new city hall with some affordable housing up top. I mean, we have a nice big chunk of land across from 901. I mean, it's going to be comfortable. It's going to be accessible. I don't know. I don't know, maybe somebody else wants to buy that building with deeper pockets and they can fix all the things wrong with it. So, I mean, don't tell them that I said that, but.
Councillor Audie Kelly.
Oh, I love that, Councillor Nixon. Actually, sort of going along the lines of where Councillor Nixon was headed, I think. Will we, first of all, couple things. Will this be part of our building condition analysis that you're doing, the report you told us about last council meeting?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. And would we then, because I having seen that movie, can really relate to what Councillor Nixon's saying, and thinking about putting people in the basement kind of is a little scary to me. Will we do a cost benefit analysis on what it might be like to construct new versus spending a lot of money on that building? And also, I have to concur with Councillor Shoesmith's points that he made. We do have some other pressing needs for the community, so we would have to take into account, because I do agree with Councillor Shoesmith about the optics of that.
Councillor Ramirez.
Thanks, Your Worship. Actually, two things that I wanted to say. One is going back to what Councillor Audie Kelly had mentioned a couple of meetings ago, CAO. This is all coming back to that real estate strategy. I think having that comprehensive plan will tie back into what we want to do with all the heritage buildings, including the city hall. So before we have a good grasp of that, I think we shouldn't be looking at all these renovations and all these things. First thing. The second thing that I wanted to ask was, and sorry for my curt questions here, but really what I was hoping that you would answer is yeah, here's where it is in our strategic priorities, and here's the line item, and here's how we brought this to the council table. Like that, I didn't see. Now I'm asking this question, where is it in our strategic priorities, that long sheet that we have?
Appreciating the comments about the real estate strategy. I haven't made it a priority and budgeted for it this year, specifically because I've canvassed every colleague in the province. And while a Vancouver or a Surrey or a Richmond or a community that has a development corporation will have a real estate strategy, almost nobody our size in the entire province or Western Canada does. It's a large strategic effort to figure out what council's philosophy is. Should probably be based on an updated community vision through an official community plan, so that we then know what values council wants to advance, and then really actually take meaningful action towards developing a strategy for implementing a real estate strategy like that. With our acquisition and disposition policies, we're pretty much standard practice for municipalities until you reach a size where they will have a real estate arm, as in a development arm of their staff, and the horsepower to do a large real estate strategy and manage a portfolio proactively. So there is a capacity question. If it's something council really wants to move forward, specific direction from council to reprioritize that and to put some significant effort behind it, if you want to get into that. And I appreciate that it's been voiced and it was noted in a review. Having taken that review and discussed it with colleagues all across this province, there are not many real estate strategies that are much more than the values we are seeking to advance with our procurement or disposition of properties, and we have that currently. I would say it is on the project now, because when we look at replacing carpet, we're going to have to do a major renovation, and there are some tripping hazards in terms of carpet. When we look at wanting to improve air quality, there are some major renovations, and we should be doing this major plan if we're going to do anything more than add some cubicles. And we simply have staff working in uncomfortable and concerning conditions at times. And I know it's not attractive to the public to invest in your employees. It simply isn't. I see that in the dialogue with the public. They're not interested in the same way in investing in the safety and employment experience of City of Fernie staff in the same way that I know council and myself as an employer is. And sometimes that's a challenging discussion, but that's why it's here at the table at the end of the day, because we have concerns about air quality, accommodations, that it's fit for work. And it's been a long time that it hasn't been fit for the actual purpose we've been putting it to. It doesn't take too long to look at how bad we had to see the public works complex get before it finally hit a point where it was renovated or where the fire hall had to get to. And I, frankly, that's because it's not a big public interest to see a big renovation into a public works complex. But then it has to be closed and people have to be moved and we need a new place. So.
Well, and
Apologies if that comes off as a bit lectury, but I do rankle a bit because we have very real concerns about our staff. We do our best to provide a healthy and safe working environment. And we do a much better job of that when we're proactive in appreciating that despite it not being a new community center or pool or playground, it is a very real responsibility of a responsible employer.
Well, and it does occur to me that regardless of having a current real estate strategy or developing a real estate strategy, the part of the question here is we need to answer a whole series of questions with the building condition assessment to know where we are in terms of all our facilities across the board and where we would, to your point, Mr. Logan, prioritize improvements or disposition potentially of some of those assets. You know, as has been a fairly active conversation around this table. So yeah, there's some stepwise processes that need to happen here before we understand, you know, what levers we can pull in terms of disposition of some of those properties or improvements for that matter. Councillor Hamilton. And
thank you. Yeah, it's obviously a very big project that we're looking down the pipe of to try and do even minor renovations with the fact that it's a historic building, it's aging, everything's past its end of life, so to speak. But we also have some very concrete and very real examples of what happens to our facilities if we don't invest in that maintenance, if we don't invest in that upkeep and keep those renovations happening. Sure, it might not be palatable to some members of the community, but as employers, as Mr. Bornowski mentioned, you know, we are the employers of the employees of the City of Fernie, and we have a responsibility to provide safe work environment. Whether or not this building is unsafe, I'm not getting that sense quite yet. However, it does have some fairly significant safety hazards with lack of secondary exits, potential air quality issues. It's all in the report. I don't need to go through and list it. So I am in favor of moving this forward. You know, we need to get an assessment of the building. We need to start building the plan. To Councillor Nixon's earlier point, I would like to see a cost benefit analysis of migrating City Hall, creating a new facility. What does that look like vis-a-vis repairing and renovating the City Hall as is? It's got tremendous heritage value, as has already been mentioned as well. And, you know, we need to factor that into our decision of how we proceed. Do we continue with that facility because of its heritage value? Where does that fall into our policy and priorities? So that's my little piece. Thank you.
thank you. Councillor Audie Kelly and then Councillor Ramdas.
Yeah, CAO, I can appreciate what you're saying as a long-term employee of the province. Taxpayers also aren't crazy about investing in our office space either. I think for me, I really would like to see the condition assessment of that building. To want to know if it's wise to invest more in it, or maybe it is better for us to really, as Councillor Nixon pointed out, look at our other options. So could I just ask you a little bit more about a sort of a current fix that you had talked about, which was utilizing council chambers and where that fits into our current budget and what we would need to do to sort of make that happen. So at least in the interim, we've got something better for staff than what they're currently working with?
Yeah, I can shed some light on that. So a while ago, I was asked to work with Director of Planning to sort of complete an exercise to shuffle desks and spaces around to get all of planning in one location. So right now, I believe their planning clerk's downstairs and they have some building officials across the hall. So they're a bit separated. It doesn't really work for, team collaboration as well as it should. And same thing goes for a lot of the other departments in City Hall. Like we've renoed closets for offices, right? There's multiple people working in the same office. There's staff working in hallways essentially. So by taking over the council council area upstairs, it provides opportunity to create another bullpen. We'd have to look into whether our network can supply all the cabling allowed. I know there is cabling up to council chambers because we ran it up there for that very reason. So I believe there is about 6 Cat5 cables up there. But it would be significant shuffle around, but it would probably put more departments together as a result. At the end of the day, there's still going to be a ton of stuff that needs to be fixed. Like you walk up to that building every morning and the stairs are falling apart. I looked into replacing those stairs. It was going to be an obscene amount of money, 100 grand, I think. And how can we do a redo of the front stairs when we know it's not accessible to the public? We should be building a ramp, not stairs, but we can't do stairs. Or we can't do a ramp in front because it's a heritage building. It's got to conform to So when I reached out to the consultants, the Ants Building consultants, heritage consultants, their theory on renovating heritage buildings is you can try and mimic the form and character, or you can go completely modern and have a complete contrast to your heritage building, which is also acceptable. But I'm looking over at planning, wondering. So that was an interesting idea where there would be a service from the back with a pass through for our citizens to be able to access council chambers and pay their invoices or their tax bills and an accessible main floor. This short-term solution that's offered doesn't address any of those issues. And we don't have an agreement with the senior center to continue council chambers here further. So that would have to be done. This technology has to be replaced. And then if I could just go even further to when asked, where's this line with strategic goals? I point back to council strategic goals of organizational excellence, which emphasizes building modernization or business modernization. It's pretty hard to do when you're in a building that hasn't been updated since the 70s. And organizational culture with health and safety and organizational excellence being part of that. Also the asset management, understanding our assets, replacement needs, ongoing improvements, the cost of that, that's all an attempt of this direction. Today is to try and come back with more information so we can understand what it might cost to do those types of things. And Armstrong, my hometown, just built a new city hall and I think it costs $30 million and everyone's quite upset about that.
Further, Councillor?
Yes, thanks, Your Worship. Well, just recognizing the constraints that we're under, the staff capacity, the fact that we've got a fire hall that we're going to try and take to referendum, et cetera, et cetera. I guess, thank you very much, Director, and I totally appreciate it. But I'm hoping to sort of get at what can we do in our current time constraint that is going to help staff, that isn't going to be over the moon expensive, but it's going to make it better for staff working. I realize that the conditions are not going to be ideal. That building is, as you mentioned, very old. But does the taking over the council chambers, do staff feel that that is going to help at least alleviate some of the current pressure that they're facing? Or is it just, a Band-Aid?
Through the chair, it's a Band-Aid, but it's going to make it more comfortable to wear that Band-Aid, I guess. There was, I think it was, what are we at? 28 staff at the time they did this report. There was I think 8 or something.
12.
12. So that's quite an improvement to the complement of staff without improvements to the building at all. And this report was meant to like prepare for the 28 staff we currently have. To answer your question more directly, it will make it more comfortable in City Hall, in my opinion. I feel like there's things we can do within existing budgets, as I mentioned, that will make it more comfortable to work in City Hall. However, it addresses none of the issues that I've pointed out and other reports have pointed out.
Thank you. Councilor Ramdas.
Worship, if you wouldn't mind, I have two pieces, two different questions, not
Yeah.
related to each other. The first question is like, can you remind us like what's the current occupancy is? Like how many, like, aren't you guys working on a hybrid schedule? Some people work from home, some from office, or everyone is working from office these days? Is that
We work generally in the office these days. Yep.
okay? So the occupancy is like over 100% most of, or rather close to 100% most of the times?
Percent? Yes, 28 people.
Yeah, all of them.
However, if I may, I could go a little bit further with that. Because council chambers was upstairs originally, the building occupancy hasn't been evaluated. And I made a comment in the report and in my presentation that the need to like reevaluate the occupancy using an architect would be necessary if we were even going to put offices upstairs in council chambers, because we're grandfathered in a lot of aspects in the layout of that building, specifically the one washroom upstairs that would be considered a public washroom for council chambers. That's only allowed because we haven't touched the building forever. As soon as we do that, if we wanted to add council chambers, say back in later, after we sort of reevaluated and had a new number for the occupancy number, it would be virtually impossible to put council chambers back there, I believe, with the code restraints that are like facing us today. So once we take it away, we can't give it back unless there's a significant renovation. So that's also a consideration as well for council.
Further?
Second unrelated proposal here, Your Worship. The second piece of what the staff is asking, that's the piece I'm unclear about. It's a lot of work. I don't know what the effort is going to be for the staff to bring out a report like that. And I don't know what the trade-off is if they are going to work on this particular file. What else are they missing? Like, there's just too many questions for me. So I'm not very comfortable supporting the second part of the ask here. The first part of the ask, if there was an easy way for staff to figure out a way to accommodate the city staff in whatever section of the city hall, I'm completely in support. So my ask is there opportunity to kind of split this up and put the two things for a vote?
I expect so. I had the same question, a similar question to yours, Councilor Ramdas. Like, where does this fit in your overall work plan, Mr. Logan? And I don't really have a sense of that. So I can understand making the effort to have a shovel ready or a shovel ready grant project, but what is that, to Councilor Ramdas's comment, what does that displace or where does that fit in the workflow? I don't have a clear picture of that. And even when I read the report, I wasn't sure until I saw the agenda that we were actually really going to be looking at the two things versus the one thing. And that may be just my own reading, but yeah, I have a bit of a question about that myself. Like, how does that fit in your work plan?
So the first recommendation, like there's two recommendations in the report. The one recommendation is let us use council chambers, reconfigure City Hall, make it livable for the foreseeable future. The second recommendation, you'll notice it doesn't have a timeline. And yeah, I'm already overwhelmed with what my work plan is looking like. It's going to look like this year with my team. So I was expecting a question of a timeline of when it would come back. Optimistically, it would be great to get something after the work that's done with the $300,000 project to learn more about that will feed into this, of course.
But short of that, it's a few phone calls, understanding what it might look like. And maybe the report comes back and be, hey, if you're not willing to spend $6 million on a renovation of City Hall, maybe we should consider something else like a build. It's very open-ended. It's not, I'm not planning on bringing back a solidified project with engineers and architects all chiming in with a report and a Class B estimate. That's not the intention of what the ask is. It's more to explore of what potentially is that going to take to implement and fix all those things that I've mentioned in the report. General direction.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. Couple comments and a question. I think, this is laudable that we're going through all the facilities and looking at what they really need and really getting into brass tacks. I think that's excellent. That's what we need to be doing. And in isolation, in my mind, this is a great project. I wish we had the luxury of being able to do literally everything that we should be doing. I mean, we have more than a dozen buildings that are meh. And we really do have to pick and choose with the financial constraints we have. That being said, at some point, this is going to come to bite us if we don't address it. And being grant ready isn't something I'm opposed to, nor is preparing council chambers for use by staff. I think we're happy meeting and talking pretty well anywhere. It's not that bad. But if it's useful for staff, I have no trouble with that whatsoever. And the question, I do wonder, we mentioned being grant ready and looking at mobility grants. What scale of grants are available for that? I mean, I wouldn't imagine when somebody's creating a grant program for mobility, they're thinking, yeah, it's a ramp and it's done. I mean, this way back when this was an issue before, I kind of went over it with my old man, and just adding on to that building was going to be astronomical even back when. I mean, I don't imagine the grants would even cover a fraction of it, unless I'm mistaken. The question, I guess, is like, how big do we expect those grants are? Like, can we cover the whole project with it, or are we going to be looking at like millions asked, tens of millions?
Through the chair, it's wishful thinking to think grants are going to be out. It's when there's new legislation put out, typically there's going to be some grants that help municipalities get through meeting those legislative requirements for accessibility. So that's wishful thinking. I have no idea what the grants are going to be. No idea to, I don't even know how I would anticipate or ask what they could be.
Mr. Baranowski.
Currently, accessibility grants are woefully underfunded in the province and federally. You can get money for like a ramp or a handrail, and it's really inadequate. There are some slightly better federal and provincial heritage grants that can help you restore or upgrade a monument or a heritage property. But presently, the landscape isn't rosy in terms of a grant that would fund this type of project. It would be finding funding sources for components of the project to cobble them together. I just wanted to say, I think between Tracy Audia-Kelly and Councillor Ramadas and yourself, the questions about where something sits within, like temporally within a work plan and the opportunity cost aren't lost on me. And I appreciate that's an important question for council. And just wanted to share that, yes, you're right. There are two resolutions in the report that could easily be moved independently, and the first one could be moved and the second could be tabled pending more information or something. If that provides some comfort and allows us to bring the detail council seems to want back to the table.
Well, sorry, first.
You could go ahead. I'll come back.
Well, even the second one, to Mr. Logan's comment about, some sort of high level, like if it were just a couple of phone calls that gave us a high level kind of ballpark figure. I mean, do we want to adjust that second part of the resolution to cover that? So then we would know what our jumping off point was, whether it's something we'd want to, because it may come back that it's astronomical already. and we don't want to pursue it. But I don't know. I'm literally thinking aloud.
Yeah, I think that's a good strategy. I mean, I think we've got a lot of knowledge of the building internally as a team. You know, if I can leverage some of the knowledge of our building officials and ask some questions specifically and understand a little more with some phone calls to some architects, potentially whoever replaced LeBlond with the phone number. It's a good place to start.
Sorry, Councillor Smith.
That's all right, Mayor Milligan. Notwithstanding your comment, I'm more than happy for the first option to move, provided it does wind up being reasonable. And I say this, you know, to be blunt, like my trepidation on this has nothing to do with any sort of spite or distaste for staff or for City Hall or anything like that. It's just simply that we are playing a game of trade-offs and we have 20 things to weigh and consider, and this is one of them. And if we spend 10 million or something like that on this, that's 10 million or something that we will not spend perhaps on, you know, the school that we own or the courthouse, say, or, you know, pick anything. It might be the ball diamonds, you know. So, I mean, I think we should definitely keep that in mind. And again, it's not that I don't think this would be an excellent thing, and I think staff should have a nice place to work. It's just we have to grab the bull by the horns here and just realize that it is a game of trade-offs. And if we take a big chunk of money, it's coming from some other project as well as from the taxpayer as well. I think taxpayer broadly seems happy to pay for increased infrastructure, but I mean, that's still limited.
Thank you. Councillor McIsaac and then Councillor Ronnie Kelly.
Thank you, Worship. Lots of good points here. I apologize. I had a bunch of notes, but a bunch of that has already been covered. And, you know, I'm loath as a general rule to put a second coat of paint on, but I'm a bit scattered in here. So I apologize if I do that. A couple things that I do want to say is, one, I appreciate this coming forward. I recognize that we have a lot of priorities and so on, but I think we should never be afraid to have the challenges revealed and transparent and put out in front of everyone so we can take a hard look at it. I think it serves no one to not bring forward the necessities of our community and put it here at the table. Yes, that means some choices and some prioritizing. That's why we're all here. But I think we should never be afraid of having the look at that. So I appreciate this coming forward, and I certainly also would like to echo the comments about, I think it is important for people to have a good place to work. As somebody that spent a decade in a 6 foot by 6 foot taupe beige box, which is very soothing to me now. I haven't spent that much time in there. I just want to say I support that happening up in the council chambers. It's lovely. You'll get used to it. I'm just kidding. I'm totally kidding. I don't know what's going to happen up there, but the other thing I want to say about this is that I think the timing of this is very good coming forward. It's very fortuitous as we're having our budget discussions. I think it would be if, as we're hearing about these facility challenges and so on, and we're looking at our budget and we are deliberately planning for more of this to happen by choosing not to be forward looking as to what is coming down the road and planning for it with our spending, our budgets and reserves. The last comment that I want to make was with regards to the real estate strategy. I almost feel like perhaps we have a bit of a nomenclature challenge here and understanding of that. Because while I appreciate CEO Boranowski's comments with regards to real estate strategy as being a very large and complex organism, generally not suitable for our size of community, I'm not actually sure if that's what council is asking for. I think we want sort of the baby version of that. Is we need to understand our facilities. We need to understand what the upcoming maintenance costs and so on for those. We need to be able to prioritize them so we can determine if there are some that we just should not be throwing good money after bad anymore. And
I think that's exactly.
And that's it. Like we don't need to go a lot further than that. And I recognize even that in itself is a big chunk of work. But I certainly think that having a good understanding at the table here of what the state of our facilities right now is imperative.
Mhm.
Or we can't rank responsibility and
Right.
priorities without that understanding. So if, and I don't want to speak for the other counselors at the table, but I feel like I could make better decisions about items like this brought to the table if I had that understanding of all of our facilities and where we are with maintenance plans. And I know we have some of that information already. I don't know if we have prioritization, what the death date is for them, those types of things that might help. So anyway,
Thank you.
that's it.
Councillor Audie Kelly. And then-
Thanks, Your Worship, if you'll indulge me a little. Sorry, Director, can you just remind me when our building facility report, we're hope to have it done? Our 300, our condition assessments, like when is that, when do we expect to have that complete? Ballpark.
Through the chair, very difficult to answer that, to be honest. First goal for me is an RDS strategy. That's going to take me till June. I mean, to get it started, maybe in the third quarter, to maybe receive something the first quarter of 2026 might be realistic as I look over to my colleague for a nod. We haven't even developed the RFP.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not meaning to pressure. I'm just trying to get an idea.
No, it's a fair question. What the,
From my
timeline.
perspective through to council, I would say, we haven't even scoped the entire project. We've just used independent knowledge of Director Logan on some of the projects that he's assessed, some of the buildings he's assessed already to kind of put it together to see what our scope would be budget wise, but not, engage somebody who actually does this full time. And the 300 grand that we're proposing, we recognize that, if we're short, we can still continue forward and drop off our new buildings and get them next go around and incorporate that into the IICP.
Right.
So the newer buildings that we have, like the Public Works facility, which is at this time, minimal operating budget and minimal effort, we can get that next go around.
Mhm.
Just to go one step further, it's difficult for staff to plan the work plans. And this gets me with municipal government all the time, is when the budget's actually passed. So I actually don't want to put a ton of effort into that up until the budget's passed. So technically we could have got our ducks in a row getting ready for that and had an RFP as soon as the budget's passed. But the reality is that would be maybe a waste of effort if for some reason council wanted to remove that from the proposed budget or the capital project. So not a lot of work has been done on that project already. So it's not as far along as I would hope, I guess.
Okay, so that being said, fair. Let's call that 2026 and beyond, like to infinity and beyond, kind of like Buzz Lightyear. But in the meantime, then, from what I've understood from the reports, we could provide some additional comfort and space and workability, which means really making it easier for staff to do their jobs within budget by utilizing council chambers. So to your worship's point, I see those as kind of two separate things, and I would like us to look at it that way. And then Councillor McIsaac, yes, like when I was talking about a real estate strategy, it was more the baby version of it. Maybe there are some properties that we could look at letting go that we might be able to fund some things with, like example, the fire hall, maybe some other things. And also just to point out, I know you're sick of hearing that I work for the province, but the province a lot of times leases. Example, the office that I work out of, when I do work out of it, has been long-term leased by the province. So somebody else built it, somebody else pays the maintenance on it, somebody else put $100,000 roof on it, and we rent space there. We're also now looking at hybrid work, which means, couple of days a week, folks might work from home and then they might go into the office where there's flexible workspaces. So maybe it's unicorns and fairies, but maybe someone would want to build an office facility here that the city might want to look at a cost benefit analysis of us leasing for our staff. And then we just pay rent and they worry about all the maintenance and the asset management. So just putting that thought out there, but, thank you. But I would like to see us do something now for staff, if we can.
Councillor Robidas.
Thanks, Your Worship. I think Councillor already covered most of the things that I wanted to say. Yes, and to McIsaac's point, there is a nomenclature issue here. I
Mhm.
think the facilities assessment, at a very minimum, will give you a good understanding of where each of the assets are. However, it is not as simplistic as that, Councillor. What I also want to see is how do we kind of monetize some of these assets, right? That's the $10 million question, so to say, that we have never really broached upon. I don't know if the CAO is talking about something like that or something even grander. Like that's where I'm unable to understand. I'll give you an example. Like this is what I'm thinking, right? Like as one of the options for one of the heritage buildings, are there like some high-end condo developer that wants to come and build something there, and will that generate revenue for the taxpayers, right? Those are the kind of questions that I want to be addressed before we go and plunk in a huge amount of capital on any kind of renovation. 902 also same aspect. Like, are there opportunities to build commercial real estate there?
Mhm.
Like those like I need some kind of uh, understanding as to how we can grasp those kind of issues. Like, is it even possible at our scale? So all I'm trying to say is, while Councillor McIsaac's definition kind of covers 80% of that, there's still that 20% which is around monetization, which I really want us to address within this term.
Mr. Baranowski?
I would say that then Councillor McIsaac's point of view is probably 20% of the project, and 80% is what you're talking about. What is analysis and market outreach and engagement with developers from across Western Canada on what their interests are, and like it's very real. Like that's a profession and a career that I can't easily I would ask for some specific direction and to bring back a proposed scope to kick about and then scope out to let council know what that would take. It's really big work. Like it's not a call to a couple people to find out if someone wants to redevelop the courthouse into a boutique hotel and what that monetization is compared to offering it back to the province, compared to renovating it and occupying it. Like those are really big efforts. I just think there's a lot, and so understanding what the actual perspective is for council will then allow me to figure out what that scope of work is. But I also appreciate we're getting very far off track compared to what the report is about.
But it is in many ways sort of this report leads to that conversation, because it is essentially talking about a high level condition assessment of one of our buildings. And I don't know if there's a consideration in the building condition assessment, that scope of work, and maybe, well, I doubt it is, but is there a subset of that work for a later date that looks at so we will have worked through the condition assessment, all our buildings, identified them where they are in terms of their lifespan, et cetera, et cetera. Is there a subset of that work or an additional piece of work then that goes and looks at our bare land assets and says, these have X notional value in the current market, just as a high level, even addendum to that, so that you can, as an organization and a council, we can look at, oh, well, we have these pieces of land for potential disposition. So it's very difficult to be strategic when we don't know what those holdings are and what sort of analysis we've done, like even a high level analysis of what we could do with them.
I agree, valuable info.
Yeah.
Not presently defined as like a year two
Yeah.
follow-on study, but
Yeah,
important
yeah.
information.
Councillor Ida Kelly?
Your worship, is this maybe something that we could kick around at our strategic plan review
I think
that we're going to do?
That makes sense to me, actually. Yeah. Yeah. That might be part of that sort of strategy conversation about future looking. So thank you, Mr. Logan. I think everybody's who had their hand up has spoken. So I turn to council and are we comfortable currently dropping sort of the second half of this recommendation or amending it such that Mr. Logan is comfortable he can do very sort of high level outreach just to get some scope numbers? Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. I would be in favor of keeping the second component. It doesn't have a timeline. And more than anything, as part of our resolutions tracker, I would like to see that resolution sit there. I'm comfortable if it sits there for a year or 18 months or 2 years or whatever, but at least it's recorded, and in the future councils, whoever, they'll be able to go back and see that this is something that we've tasked staff to do when and where appropriate.
Yeah, when
So
resources, yeah.
maybe it requires a slight verbiage edit, but it's not something that I'm necessarily comfortable totally dropping or totally tabling.
Yeah, I appreciate that expected, not least of all because it doesn't have a timeline. Yes.
To improve clarity and in terms of process, I'd like to do a logical and sequential sort of process here and maybe put forward the motion first by adjusting the recommendations using numbers. And then we could possibly perform an amending exercise there. Let's put something down first.
Put something on the table.
Yes,
Okay.
if that's okay.
Councillor McIsaac.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that council direct staff to repurpose the old council chamber space at City Hall to accommodate multiple workstations for employees. Period.
Moved by, or seconded by Councillor Hamilton. Any further discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous. Hey, Councillor Hamilton.
I would like to move that council direct staff to develop a budget and work plan to complete the necessary outstanding improvements to City Hall outlined in this project as a future capital project.
Seconder, Councillor Shoesmith. Any further discussion? All those in favor? So 2 separate resolutions. This one not time bound. Councillor, sorry. Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Myself, Councillor Nixon, Councillor Shoesmith, Councillor Hamilton. And those opposed? Councillor Audie Kelly, Councillor Ramadas, and Councillor McFadden. Are you satisfied? Perfect. Thank you. Great conversation. With that, before we move on to the next item, I wouldn't mind taking a 10-minute recess. Thank you. Can we reconvene, please? No, that's okay. Did she? I don't think my wife ever chimed in. Is she? Oh. Welcome back, everybody. This brings us to item 11.4, 2025-2029 financial plan operating budget report from our Director of Finance, Mr. Burdett.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. Good evening, Council. I have a short to medium presentation for tonight. You see the title there. It says Budget Recap. We are kind of at the end of our budget process. And so this slide deck is intentionally a little more high level. If anyone watching this for the first time is interested in more of the details, there were very detailed presentations to Council on January 30th and February 4th and February 12th, if anyone should like to watch those meetings. A quick agenda. I would like to start with a few Budget 101 slides that I presented at the open house on February 19th. And then I will present tables from the draft budget bylaw for initial readings on March 11th. A high-level recap of our major projects for 2025, our funding shortfall for 2025, alongside a summary of our revenue increases and incremental cost drivers for 2025. A lot of these slides, this will be the fourth, maybe fifth time Council has seen them. But again, for anyone watching for the first time at home, it is worth a reminder. So as always, please interrupt me with questions if I'm moving too fast. This is our council meeting budget schedule, tonight being February 25th, where we are asking council for direction on the preparation of a budget bylaw. This bylaw would then go for first, second readings on March 11th, third reading on March 18th, and adoption scheduled for March 25th. This is well in advance of the official provincial deadline of May 15th. Also for reference, last year we adopted the budget bylaw on April 16th, but just a reminder to council that we also have to do readings of the tax rate bylaw immediately after this budget bylaw, which is also due May 15th. The readings and adoption for that bylaw is scheduled for the April 22nd and May 13th council meetings. Before I get into Budget 101, this was an item asked for at the February 12th council meeting, which is a headcount dashboard for council. Some key numbers on this slide. You can see we hired 39 people in 2024 and saw 36 people leave the organization. Staffing levels by department are also listed there. We currently have one vacant exempt position, which is currently posted on our website, 18 vacant casual/temporary positions. The casual positions depend on the season, obviously, but we have open postings for some casual clerks at City Hall that often float around and assist other departments. A few summer students, temporary labor, and about 6 positions at the pool.
And not related to this, to your presentation necessarily, Mr. Burdett, but I wonder if this could be included in our quarterly dashboard update.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
But first, to summarize again, what is a municipal budget? Very simply, it's determining how much money will be raised by the city and how much money is spent and what it's spent on. At a high level, the budget is split into 3 major sections. One is the operating budget, which we went through in detail on January 30th. And that includes things like our day-to-day spending, like wages and benefits, insurance, utilities, et cetera. Next is our capital budget, which are larger expenditures that the city plan on using for a period of time longer than 12 months. Examples of that would be vehicles or buildings or additions to buildings that extend their useful life. And then the third is our utilities budget, which are defined by drinking water and sewer. Water and sewer budgets are not affected by the tax rate. The funding source for those are the quarterly utility fees. Municipal budget every year must be done via a council-approved bylaw. This budget bylaw must be for a period of 5 years. And so we're still operating on last year's 2024 bylaw, which because it was for 5 years, also includes this year. And again, these bylaws are due to the province by May 15th. Municipalities' budget must be balanced. We cannot run a surplus or a shortfall. And so really our only two options when it comes to balancing the budget is either by raising the amount of revenue we bring in to meet increasing costs, or by finding and utilizing new and efficient ways of doing things to reduce costs. The city of Fernie, since I've been here, has been doing both. And then lastly, just a note on surplus, as I do see this question every year. Snipped to the right there is our 2023 audited income statement. And you'll see on the income statement, you'll see revenues and expenses. And then at the bottom, there's that line annual surplus. But what's not included here is our contributions to reserves or capital purchases. So it looks like we run surpluses, but it's just how our financial statements are presented. This slide is a list of our various revenue sources. I won't go through these in detail tonight, but again, anyone that's interested, please tune into the January 30th council meeting where we went through these in detail. And so 2025 budgeted revenues is just over 31 million. This slide is our expenses, same as the last slide. Lots of detail on these in previous council budget meetings, January 30th and February 4th. And so revenue from the last slide minus expenses from this slide, we have our shortfall at around $575,000. So then what happens with that shortfall? Again, budget must be balanced. If that shortfall is funded purely through a taxation increase, that would translate this year to a 6.1% increase, which coincidentally is the same increase as last year, was also 6.1%. The other option would be a reduction in a specific service level. We did explore many service level decrease options at the February 12th council meeting for anyone watching that's interested.
Councillor McIsaac.
Thank you, Worship. Sorry for the delay there. Could you go back one slide, please? I'm just wondering, there's a discrepancy, but it's probably me. The transfer to reserves here shows us 3.7 million, but in the report, in the discussion about potential shortfall indicates that we're putting in 4.1 million. So what did I miss there?
Thanks, Councillor McIsaac. The difference is likely the amount that we get from the gas tax, the old gas tax program. I likely just have it classified different on one of those two slides. So typically that one or the RMI reserve can be classified differently because it comes from external sources.
Okay.
So I suspect that would be the difference here. I can confirm and let you know if there's something.
Okay, I'm sure you're right. Thank you.
Good question.
Sorry, completely unrelated. Just a question for this room. Deborah, I wonder if you can turn that fan off. It's causing a strobe on my, as I get tired here, I'm going to have a seizure. Thank you. Thank you so much. Sorry.
No problem. As I was saying, we did explore many service level decrease options at the February 12th council meeting for anyone that's interested in watching that presentation. And the decision on how to balance the budget is ultimately a responsibility of council. So then after council makes their decision and a budget bylaw is adopted, the next step in the budget process is the tax rate bylaw. The city is only allowed to collect the amount of money that council has authorized. That's the only relevant number, that dollar value of tax revenue. Assessment value does not matter. Our tax revenue does not go up or down with assessment values on top of the increase council has approved. Assessment values are only used to help us set what the tax rate for each property is in order for us to collect the total revenue number that council has approved. So I've got a little bit of historical math here to help with that understanding. Recently in the last 5 years, except this year, Fernie's assessment values have gone up quite a bit, 20%, some years 30%. This year, the city average is an increase of around 2%. In those past 5 years, however, council's been approving tax increases between 5 and 6.8%. Because of this difference in assessment increases versus council's approved tax increase, the property tax rate in Fernie has actually dropped significantly in the last 5 years. In 2018, before this assessment boom, tax rate was 3.86 per $1,000 of assessed value. The most recent in 2024, the tax rate was 3.13, which is a drop of 19% over that time. Just to close out this slide, what would the effect of a 6.1 tax increase be on the average single-family home in Fernie? This year, it's about $173 annually, or $14.41 per month. This slide explains that property tax math in a different way. For simplicity, pretend in 2024 you had a house assessed at $100,000 and the city needs to collect $500 worth of property tax. That would make your tax rate $5 per $1,000 of assessed value. Now in 2025, council approves a tax increase of 6.1%, but your assessed value also went up by the city average of 2%, which is the actual average this year, 2%. So now your house is assessed at 102,000. Does that mean you'll have to pay 2% more tax and then also 6.1% more tax? No, you still only have to pay the additional 6.1% additional tax. So in this case, we would adjust the tax rate up to 5.20098 for $1,000 of assessed value. The tax rate in this example increases by only 4% to ensure we only collect the additional 6.1%. This slide is directly from BC Assessment and explains, again, what assessment value is used for. It's saying that if your house increases less than the average in your town, you will pay slightly less of an increase in tax than the average. And the opposite holds true as well. If your property value goes up by more than the average, your increase will likely be slightly more than average. This slide is the revenue section of the financial plan bylaw that would come to council on March 11th. The point of these three slides is just to highlight the detail that council approves. So it is very rolled up, but the bylaw is very rolled up itself. So that's all this slide is intending to highlight for council. I think the number here that will jump out at first glance is the 18.5 million in 2026, and then 9.5 million grant revenue in 2027. Those numbers are, call it a placeholder for the protective services facility or the fire hall and the project that we call the CNL right away. And by which I just mean that the source of funding for those projects, while at the moment says borrowing or grants, could still change between now and then. Notably for the fire hall, we're still hoping to find some grant funds to help. And also the amount is not finalized either.
Sorry, Mr. Burdett, just for my own edification, the grants that have come into the community for things like the old fire hall site redevelopment and the new childcare and housing development by the pool, those grants go to the proponent, in this case, the Elk Valley Family Society. Is that correct?
Thanks, Mayor Milligan. For the most part, yes, they're externally managed. The childcare one we did get a little bit of, and we were in charge of distributing that, but which has all been distributed. So there's no effect on our budget in and out in that
Just a
sense.
flow through.
Yeah.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
And for your information, we're not charging an administrative fee for that
Okay.
that one grant management.
Thank you.
This table would be the expenses portion of our bylaw. The increases you see here over the next 5 years are purely inflationary and contractual increases, assuming a continued level of service. Obviously, a lot can change, but this is what our next 5 years look like as of now. And then this last slide that would make up the financial plan bylaw is our transfers to and from reserves, interest and debt payments, and capital expenditures. As for capital, this slide is a really quick summary of our major projects scheduled for 2025. There's 2.4 million of fleet replacement. There's a few big items in there like a Zamboni and a vac truck and a sweeper and a loader. I think a grader's in there as well. Mount View Dike, which council heard tonight, is a grant funded project. There will also be some work on fire hall design and work on the referendum later this year. Our annual roads program is scheduled for over on Cedar Avenue. And then some work around legislative requirements on our water and sewer infrastructure, and also continuing work on a secondary water source options analysis, which is another externally funded project. This slide is our preliminary shortfall for 2025 and sum of increased costs and revenues. It's just over 575,000. For reference, last year our shortfall was 530,000. This shortfall translates to a 6.1% tax increase. Additional revenue includes new construction, which is worth approximately 134,000, of additional revenue. The increase in our Elk Valley property tax sharing agreement, which is Fernie's share of the property tax paid by the coal mines in the valley. And we have a grant that is being used to pay for an additional 0.5 FTE in our planning department. Increased expenses are additional wages, which apart from the 60,000 for additional 0.5 planner, 20,000 for the introduction of a GIS summer student. Apart from those two, this is all related to the expected contractual increases from our various agreements with our employees.
Sorry, Mr. Burdett, based on the feedback we received in the budget survey, I feel like, particularly on wages and benefits, potentially, when we publish our SOFI report, we need to potentially think about a companion piece that actually explains what that is and how that, because I think there's a significant misunderstanding about rates of pay, et cetera. And I'd like to clarify that for folks. We seem to get a lot of feedback about inflated salaries, and yet that report is not a true reflection of people's base salary and et cetera.
That's exactly right. It includes things like overtime and travel costs, and that's a good idea. That report itself is a legislative requirement.
I understand that. Yeah.
Yeah, and so historically we've just been meeting the legislation around the publishing of it, and so I think a little more clarity behind that.
This is something to give some thought, I think. Thank you.
So moving on, last year, council authorized the use of a COVID restart grant to offset increasing costs at the pool. But this year that grant is no longer available. Our costs of computer licensing and support have increased by about 67,000. And then there's an other line for all the other smaller increases this year. And I would like to add again, for some context, that 6.1% is still one of the lower increases I've seen from municipalities. Noting, of course, that comparing municipalities is often not useful, but it's worth pointing out. This slide is the impact of the budget on the average single-family residential home in Fernie. Our proposed property tax increase, coupled with water, sewer, and garbage increases, amount to an additional $203 annually, or just over, or $16.95 per month. Last year, for reference, it was an additional $186 annually. And again, this number is just for the city portion. We also collect for other jurisdictions on our property tax bills. The only other jurisdiction that I've received the information for, and it's still draft, is for the regional district. The RDEC is looking at a 2% increase, noting that last year they were 3.5%, but the year before that they were 10.5%. And so that 2% increase would amount to approximately $9.50 per year for the average residential home in Fernie. There's others that have yet to finalize, including the regional hospital, BC assessment, and the amount that goes to the province for the school district. None of those have reported yet. And now Ms. Rhodes is going to run council through a summary of the public feedback we received from our budget survey.
Thank you. So first, I just wanted to give a quick overview of the budget feedback more generally. So we had a survey that was open from February 13th to the 23rd on Let's Talk. That opened after the drill down meeting on February 12th. And was at the same time a budget at a glance document was published to support the public in that feedback period. We did have 284 downloads of that document to date on Let's Talk, and we've had over 500 visitors to that project page. We had 87 responses to the survey opportunity, as well as 2 emails to Let's Talk, which we also advertise as an opportunity through the feedback period for people who wish to communicate that way. We had 2 in-person events, the Business Beer Banter and Budget, which was new this year and co-hosted by the Chamber. So thank you to the Chamber for their support with that. That was on February 10th, and we had approximately 30 people at that. And then we had a public open house here at the Senior Center last week on February 19th, and we had 17 people stop by to chat with staff and council.
Councillor Hamilton?
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt as you were going through there, but I did have a question on the report that we received about the survey. And when I look at the stats from Survey Tool, it says we had 75 contributors, but 87 submissions.
Yeah, so there is a issue or a piece with the anonymous if the non-registered, which for these feedback opportunities, we no longer require people to register on Let's Talk. So if 2 people did the same survey from the same device, then we get that as 1 contributor, or if they use the same. So unfortunately, we can't know whether somebody decided to fill out 2 surveys in this instance, but that is the reason for that.
Would that be true of a home computer as well, if they don't register, like 2 family members use the same computer and that counts as 1 submission?
I believe as long as you're using the same device for this and you go through Let's Talk in the same way, that it'll pick up as separate submissions, but it's the considered 1 contributor on the back end of the site.
Thank you.
So after those events, we did drop the budget boards at the library and the aquatic center to allow for more opportunities for the public to review that information over the weekend. And again, thank you to the library for supporting us with that. It was well received last year, and we've had positive feedback again this year. And this was supported with advertising in the free press, on our website, posters through town, social media, and then it was also covered by our local media and shared by our community partners through their networks. So the feedback which council excuse me, has been provided in advance of this meeting. It is important to note again that these submissions were anonymous, and this is not a statistically valid sample size. However, these do represent community members who took time to review the budget material and provide their input on what's being proposed, and excuse me, considering areas where they would like to see increased focus, corresponding reductions, and any additional comments that they may have. Nearly all the respondents who did, excuse me, had reviewed the budget at a glance, did it, or they'd watched a meeting or attended a budget event, which was the first question that we asked. And then from there, we asked them, having reviewed the proposed 2025 budget, were there areas or services where you'd like to see additional focus or investment? And the following are the themes that we saw. Infrastructure, so investing in water, sewer, and critical infrastructure improvements. Core service delivery, so we had many respondents highlighting investment in core services like roads, pothole patching, paving, sidewalks, clearing and maintenance, and some comments around snow management as well. Then facility maintenance and investment was an area of focus for many, highlighting maintenance of our existing facilities, planning for replacement, and a specific focus on the community center, the need to plan for indoor recreation space. Trail network maintenance and support. There were a number of respondents citing investment in the trail network and funding for the FTA, or the Fernie Trails Alliance. Specifically, reserve contributions. We saw a number of respondents identifying meeting the targets of the 2018 Asset Management Investment Plan, or increasing reserve contributions to ensure that we're preparing for upcoming facility renewals. And then administration costs with a focus specifically suggesting that we look at cost reductions tied to staffing and administration costs, and then taxation and fees, again, in the same vein, respondents suggesting that we look at or consider taxation and affordability, and then looking in tandem at fees and opportunities to create revenue, not through taxation. And then the second piece of that, respondents were asked if they wanted to see increased focus or investment in an area. Were there other areas where they would be comfortable with corresponding reductions to fund those changes? And again, if we theme these generally, there were taxation and fees, but there were a number of respondents in this category that were suggesting that the city shouldn't be looking at reductions, but instead focusing on increasing fees and or taxing to make necessary improvements or investments in service delivery. And that was suggested, again, that reviewing fees might be a way to see some cost recovery and subsidization, or ensuring that there was equal subsidization or user pay in certain areas. And this does echo, when we look at taxation, what we saw in the citizen satisfaction survey around tax and service preferences. And again, for that, that was a statistically valid survey completed in fall of 2023. And just for a reminder for council and the public, at that point, 51% of the respondents, or pardon me, 47, said that the city should only apply an inflationary increase in taxes and maintain current levels of services and programs. And that 22% said the city should increase taxes and improve services and programs. And then we had 9% who thought the city should decrease taxes and cut back on services and programs. Again, a common theme in the reduction area, which was spoken to earlier by Director Burdett and Mayor Milligan, was wages and administration costs. Again, people suggested that we should be looking at staffing, wages, and costs in administration specifically as an area for cost savings and efficiencies. And there was particular focus on the exempt staff team and the fire department. And that leads into the next point, fire and emergency services. Again, this was twofold, with suggestions at looking at reviewing staffing within the fire department and also at cost containment for a new fire hall facility. And the partner funding, there were a number of suggestions around refining how we do fund community organizations, which organizations receive support from the city, and the level of support received. And there were very varied suggestions, again, for whether we increase or decrease support in certain areas. And then with that, again, this was a qualitative survey with the opportunity for people to provide written comments for our written feedback. So there was a whole range of other suggestions for options for improving efficiencies that really spanned from extending the life of existing equipment instead of buying new, modernizing processes, suggestions around not mailing out utility bills, lots of different creative suggestions around, and then more standard in terms of divesting facilities and looking for opportunities to partner with other community groups for our service delivery. And then there was a final question that asked for additional comments, feedbacks, and if you had any questions. And that feedback really did mirror and echo what we saw in these first two questions. So people chose to answer in one of those three questions, but we saw the same themes and then also some opportunities to either provide information in a different way or provide additional information. Some of it, like Director Burdett spoke to, there were some questions around that $18.5 billion and the proceeds from borrowing. So suggestions from the community on ways that we could provide information that would make it easier for them to engage in the budget process.
Thank you, Ms. Rose.
Before I go on, I was thinking about Councillor McIsaac's question. And so on that slide earlier, the contributions to reserves would include those externally funded reserves like RMI and Community Works Fund, the old gas tax. But the table in the report also does not include those, but does include the water and sewer reserves. And on the shortfall slide, it doesn't have water and sewer because it's not affected by taxation. So those three things are the main reason for that variance that you noticed.
Thanks for the clarification.
You're welcome.
Councillor Adia Kelly.
Thanks, Your Worship. So that being said, what is the actual amount that we're putting into reserves?
It would be the 4.1 that's on your report, that we are funding our own reserves from through taxation. And I'm about to get to the slide on the shortfall that's in the report, but the water and sewer reserves specifically, they're generally in line with that 2017 AMIP. So the shortfall are the ones that are funded by property tax and not utility fees. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I will just share my screen again. And so before I close, I wanted to remind council of what I heard were some key topics that were kind of not fully decided on throughout the budget process. One was the cost of patching with external contractors. It's gone up 55% since 2017, but our dollar amount in the budget has remained the same. If we maintain that same dollar amount, the amount of patching will have to decrease this year. To maintain current levels of patching, we'd require an additional $35,000 in this year's budget, or an additional 0.37% of a tax increase. And then, as I was just talking about, the other item I wanted to highlight for council is our level of funding to reserves. The 2017 Asset Management Investment Plan, or AMIP, recommends a funding level of 4.8 million to our reserves. We're currently funding 4.74 minus 600K for the short-term loan payment for the ops facility, which is done this year. So next year, if we kept the same, we would be funding 4.74 million, which is a shortfall of 66,500 when compared to that 2017 AMIP report. And last year, council will remember that the COVID restart grant that I talked about earlier was used to offset the cost at the pool, but then we didn't reduce the tax rate. We instead put that extra money into reserves. So last year, the shortfall was around 360,000, and now it's 66.5. And council will remember that there's a couple of projects this year specifically aimed at increasing our available data and also updating the numbers that form part of that 2017 AMIP plan. And so after those projects, I would only expect our recommended reserve contribution shortfall to increase. But with our current data, shortfall is 66,500. And so if council wanted to completely bridge the gap on that shortfall, that would be another 0.71% tax increase, which then brings me to the direction being asked from council on preparing a budget bylaw with a specific direction on level of taxation. There's a few options available to council on what a level of taxation could be, which are listed on this slide. But really, council can elect to do whatever they want. These are just some options I put there for reference. And I will, for a note on process, council is being asked for direction tonight, but that doesn't mean it's final. Because March 11th would be the budget bylaw for first, second readings, and I will be prepared at that time to change the bylaw any which way. So that's it. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Mr. Burdett. Questions from council. Councillor Adia Kelly.
Thanks, Your Worship. I read through all of these like line by line in this submissions that were given to us. And a lot of the comments are about us controlling our admin costs and wages and stuff. And I know that there is a trend right now in government, including in the province, to have a hiring pause or freeze. So this might be more for you, CAO, than for our CFO. What would be the risks to the organization, say, if we didn't fill that one exempt vacancy we have for the time being?
As a specific example, you'd lose the productivity of your director of engineering and public works, who's backfilling a manager position while also carrying their own position. So this is the person who oversees streets and water and wastewater and handles the procurement and project management for those three divisions. Streets has an assistant manager because it's a big and complex and chaotic in terms of scheduling. When can you do work or have to do work is highly weather dependent. But those are three very large divisions that would just have no manager. And so it's double loading the director specifically with another job without backup for on-call evenings, weekends. And if I may, would be one of the last places I would look. If I'm being frank, I think we absolutely need on-the-ground support and coverage and line management for our utilities and our streets crew. It's at the core of what we do.
Further?
Yes, and so then we'd potentially have like an overtime cost.
You would potentially have more of an overtime cost. Yeah, certainly. As with snow clearing, you're aware we do not fully staff the service area. We rely on overtime because we just determine that because there are peaks and valleys, we can't fully staff for the people we would want for a full response without overtime. And then to also have those people working when we're not doing full response. So there are areas where we unfortunately have some structural overtime, but you would incur more overtime, certainly, yeah.
And following along that line, I'm assuming similarly, if we didn't hire casual folks or things like that, we're going to see costs crop up in other ways.
Certainly. And I know, I mean, many of us will have worked at places where you have what is essentially a hiring freeze, where a director or a executive for a department has to approve backfilling any position. And so just to be clear on our approach, when almost any position in the last 2 years, when almost any position across the city has been vacated, whether that's the end of a temporary contract or other, we look strategically at that position. Is the job title right? Do we need to redevelop that job title? Or do we need to transition exactly what that person does or fill it with something else? And so we've taken a really deliberate approach on that. And I think I need to recognize our HR manager, our acting director of corporate administration services for that work. But what you experience is just there then aren't the bodies to do the work. And I think if you look back in time, you can see that we had very few people in corporate administration. And as a result, we have very poor corporate records. We had very few people in finance. And as a result, we had no knowledge management, no continuity, and very poor financial management when the really great people doing good work went on to other opportunities, which does happen. And so sometimes you have to staff for some depth, or you lose the knowledge, and sometimes I think, as well as overtime costs, you're going to experience a reduced quality of work.
Thanks, CAO. Hopefully that helps the folks, that gives them some context. So I appreciate your answers.
If I may add one more thing, specifically, as you'll remember in the deep dive, we talked about opportunities where we could save and what some of those trade-offs are. There are areas where you can look at service reductions and staffing cost reductions. We could reduce hours at the pool significantly and go back to our contractual minimum service levels, meaning hire only the minimum people were required, but then we would have very limited hours and a very reduced service to the community. And so council had directed us a status quo approach. And so we've tried to maintain our service hours because if the pool is busy, it's a going concern. We see increased revenues. It's always a loss, but we see that it's popular. So I just wanted to mention that like, if we're going to look at reducing staffing, we're going to look at reducing services in some area.
Which, to your point, speaks directly to, or in contradiction of our direction to staff to maintain steady service levels, which makes me wonder aloud about the patching program. So it's been in decline essentially since 2017 in terms of cost. The cost has been escalating substantially since that time. What have we seen on the ground? Yeah, sorry. That was entirely unintentional, but funny nonetheless. Mr. Heiser, do you have like a sense of that? Have you been struggling with, because I look at, I'm certainly sympathetic to the number, given, a 55% increase in patching costs over that time. How has that affected your work?
Yeah, through your worship to council. We had our suspicions, which is why we triggered the pavement condition assessment, right? Which validated our suspicions. Within that pavement condition assessment is also like a path forward to quote unquote maintain our pavement quality index and some budgetary guidance in there with some big numbers to get back on track. That's the project that we aren't ready to like bring to council this budget cycle, but next budget cycle. But we are seeing deterioration because we're just under investing. One of the easier things for me to bring in this budget cycle was just a simple chart, which I did, which showed increasing costs of our patching contracts. We saw that escalating through COVID. We ended up switching contractors in 22 or 23, I forget which year, to try to get costs under control again and get a little bit more patching done. But the pavement condition assessment is our guidebook, and it's validating what we're seeing on the ground, which is deteriorating pavement. And again, just like everything else, significant investment needed in the future.
And are we seeing corresponding increase in feedback, whether through requests for service or complaints? Do we have a sense of that?
The tool that we use right now is just a request for service tool. So I'd have to like go and pull real,
Yeah.
comments on pavement from each year over year, and then maybe I could see a trend. The crew, when we hit these warm spells, will be out with our little patcher that heats up our cold mix and patching as they go. But then in the spring, they're the eyes, they're the boots on the ground. They bring back in where they have concerns. And then our team meets and looks at, now we have the pavement condition assessment to layer on top of those like boots on the ground concern. And we go out and tackle what we think are the biggest priorities between those two avenues of information coming in.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I appreciate your clarity about the pavement condition assessment validating your suspicions. That's helpful. Thank you. Other questions from council? Councilor Roddy Kelly?
Thanks, Your Worship. One of the other things I noticed was a comment about the deferring of taxes, and that they thought that it wasn't fair that people defer it, because I think it was understood that they don't actually get paid. But is it not correct that if you're approved for the program, it's somewhat of a loan, and the Ministry of Finance pays your taxes for you? Is that correct?
You're referring to the seniors program?
The deferral, yeah.
Which could be seniors or families with children, as I understand it.
That's right. Yeah. Yes, the province essentially pays those taxes. And so that would like come off of our bill that we owe to the province, same way the homeowner grant does. That's a credit on our like tax return to the province. But that, that then becomes as debt for the homeowner. So if in the event of a senior, when they pass away, that accumulated debt would pass on to whoever inherits that house from them. So it's not free. Yeah, but that's how it works.
But it doesn't, sorry, I think to Councilor Ardia's question, it doesn't impact the municipality day to day.
That's right.
Yeah, thank you. Other questions, comments? Councilor McKenzie?
Thank you, Worship. I would like to draw your attention to page 112. There's a paragraph about halfway down in discussion of the values from the AMIP report. There's a sentence that says, this means the ending reserve balance projections for facilities are likely much higher than they should be. I presume that's meant to say the need is much higher than what it says. Not that the balance projections. Maybe I'm reading it wrong, because I read reserve balance projections to mean how much of this money is going to be in there. But actually what we mean is how much money is going to be needed. Is that correct?
I'm still trying to find that sentence. Is it at the top of the page?
It is 3/4 of the way down the page. Under the, there are a few points of interest regarding the data from AMIP including. And then in the first section under values used, there are 2 bullet points.
Oh yeah, okay. My intent with that sentence, and I think it's saying the same thing that you just said, but I've got that page in there with the 5-year projection of reserves, and I was
It's a
trying to,
really scary one. Yeah.
yeah, I was trying to say the ending balance on that projection is higher than it probably will be in 5 years.
Okay, good. And so I that's what I understood your intention to mean.
Mhm.
I just wanted to clarify to make sure I wasn't missing something. So, oh, I lost my page here. Hang on a second. All my little notes here. So the other question I guess I wanted to ask about reserves as we're going along here is the current reserve projections from 2017 are at least 20 to 25% out, just thinking about CPI since then. So they're significantly higher, but even at that level, like if we achieve that level, do we change our current predicament? Like the predicament we find ourselves in today, the discussion about City Hall earlier, our previous challenge at the community center and so on, is that we find that we don't actually have any money. Like in the sense that we can't respond to a significant change. We have significant projects in front of us and we don't have big reserves. We're going to have to borrow money if we want to do anything big. And yet the reserve projections that are put in there, as I understand it, are just to maintain that circumstance. It's not to actually get ahead. It's not to actually improve our circumstance. And even at that, we are millions of dollars behind. So I don't know, is that not the definition of desperate? Like, I don't know how to read that other than, boy, oh boy, is that ever a big problem if we don't do something about it? You know, we're looking at our reserves from this year, we're pulling out $8.2 million just to cover costs. We're only putting 4.1 back in. The graph goes down. There's a point where we don't have any reserves. And there's a bunch of projects that we have to have reserves just to do them, like road projects and so on. This is, so, you know, we've sat here literally with a counselor saying about the community center closing, going, how does this happen? Well, this is it. This is how it happens. Right here, this decision right now. We won't increase taxes because we want to foist this problem on the future. We're going to coast today. Coast. That's what we're going to do. On a steady decline in hopes that nothing bad happens. And if it does, people in the future will pay for it. That's the decision that we're faced right now with the current taxation level that has been put forward. I struggle with this. I struggle with it mightily because I don't want to raise taxes at all. It would be my preference if all the things in the world, the swimming pools and libraries and parks and roads and sewage collection and all those things that make our life very comfortable and well here were free, but they are not. And we have to pay for them. And I apologize, I'm getting very lectury here, but as I was reading through the reserves thing, and I know I brought this up at the table before and I'm bringing it up again, I don't understand how we can continue to make the exact same decision and expect a different outcome. It is literally the definition of insanity. So at some point, somebody has to say, we need more money. One way to get more money is taxing. Other ways to get more money would be, we can sell property. Other places have done that. That works once, right? We could get property that's actually being used to generate more taxation, but we're still talking about collecting property taxes from it, regardless of what happens to it. It's just there might be a bigger bucket. I would like to do a bunch of things. I think we really need to significantly increase the boundary of the city. We need some more property, more taxation coming in, but we can't do that today. By March 11th, we're not going to accomplish that. So we need to make a decision for then. So to that end, I'm going to implore the rest of my council to agree that we need to actually do a bigger tax increase in this. We need to make a statement and say, we're going to get at least 1% more tax rate specifically to start the direction and create it as a moral imperative to us to start building those reserves. So we do not leave the council that is sitting here 15 years from now, sitting on their hands wondering, what were they doing? What were they thinking? Anyway, that's my end of speech. I propose that this budget is good, but I think we need to add 1% more, and I think we need to dedicate it to reserves, and I think we need to give future direction that we should continue doing that until we have found replacements for the outside.
So rather than the current proposal of 66,000 to underfunded reserves, you would make that a full 1%?
Yes.
Thank you. Other comments from council? Oh, Councillor Audie Kelly, sorry, you had your hand up.
Thanks, Your Worship, and apologies to our CFO in advance, because I'm not quite sure if I'm going to articulate this well or right. So, what would be sort of the effect on individual taxpayers of, let's say, we increase the taxes to fund our reserves versus we have to borrow to do the same project? Like, will the effect of the taxpayer be better or worse if we borrow the money at current interest rates and we therefore increase what we have to pay anyway? Or if we gradually add tax on, and like, does that make sense? Am I making sense? Sorry.
Just to use an example, your question is if we borrowed 18 million for a fire hall or increased tax by enough, but to raise 18 million to pay for it in cash?
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I could map that out for council, but it would only get you the basic number as of today. So, you know, and what I mean by that is, I don't know off the top of my head how much effect it would be on a single house for 18 million. But if you did that versus borrowing money, and then people, you know, they get to keep their money for longer while we pay that loan back. It depends what that individual person does with that extra money that they get to keep. You know, some people would invest it. Other people would use it to balance their household budget, you know, and then they wouldn't be able to grow it then. So, I mean, I could get you a number that, I mean, taxing for an $18 million increase would be quite a shocking number, obviously, but even still, it's kind of still a bit of a theoretical question, depending on how people manage their money. Mr. Boranowski might have more to add.
I would like to ask for a clarifying discussion. Are we, if it's a thought exercise or a clarifying question, are we thinking, okay, 10 years from now, we know we're going to have a $10 million project, some pipe or some pump house or something. Would it be better to plan to borrow that in 10 years or start incremental increases in taxation to fund a reserve? And would we be better off? And my sense is people would not have that money in their pockets for those years if we're going to believe that they're going to have that money in their pocket and do something with it. But then the city would not have that in its reserve generating interest. And in fact, the opposite would happen. They would have a large increase at a future time, and then it would then be charged interest rather than earning it up to that point. There's a black box in terms of what interest rates will be. But am I paraphrasing a bit what your question might be?
Yeah, like say, for example, we had actually funded reserves from 2017 on to what it was suggested to us that we do. So yes, more where you're going, I think, CAO.
Okay. Can I just have a few minutes to maybe whip that around in my head? I'll come back to it though.
Sure. Councillor McIsaac and then Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Worship. I just want to riff off Councillor Audie Kelly's idea there, because I think it's an important question, determining whether we should put money away or whether we should borrow it and how that gets costed. I think the one thing that CAO Boranowski mentioned that's really important here is that it costs money to borrow money, but we actually generate money when we save money.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That we're earning the interest instead of paying the interest. And I think that's an important consideration. But yes, it is also generally true that future dollars are cheaper than today's dollars. Right?
Mhm.
So in value, when you can calculate future value, but also everything's more expensive then too. So, yeah. Anyway, I do think the earning part versus the paying part is important.
Councillor Hamilton?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it would be an interesting thing to get a spreadsheet on the future value versus net present value of the dollars. As Councilor McIsaac said, in my personal guess is that the earning the interest is going to be better off long-term than paying interest at some future point. But they're numbers. They don't have emotions. I would be keen to see what that might look like. But as well to what Councilor McIsaac was saying, that's also assuming that using the hypothetical $10 million, that number is actually going to be accurate 10 years down the road or whatever future time we are. The costs might actually, as we're finding from our AMIP report, what we estimated costs were going to be to replace things are far, far too low.
Councillor Nixon?
Thank you, Your Worship. Okay, so I'm into the patching. I like the patching increase. I'd like to see us patch the roads, go from there. But for the underfunded reserves, I've been really thinking about this a lot over the last bunch of years. And I think, this Elk Valley mine sharing tax that we have, or the Elk Valley mine sharing tax revenue that we get is $3.5 million a year, $3.567 million a year. And I really see it as a liability to the community. I don't know how long the mines are going to be around, but every single time, every single year, we get that money and we just throw it into revenues. And what I would like to see is a cap on that, $3.4 million or $3.5 million or whatever that is, and then take the rest of that money and put it right into our financial stability reserve and just cap it, because we've already extended, this is a huge liability to the community. It's a 43% tax increase if we lose the mine sharing tax, right? Or the mine sharing agreement. And it started in 2008. It's very unfortunate. We can't set a fax back in time and tell us to save that money, but we didn't. We spent it as we got it. So I think we need to cap that. So those are my two thoughts.
No, I appreciate it. Was renegotiated in 2008. It was started back in the 80s. Yeah. And I think Councillor McIsaac long ago made a point about if we'd had the foresight, council being a continuing body, to put that money into a reserve then, imagine what we'd be sitting on now. But I just want to understand, because I'm with you, Councillor Nixon, on the patching, because our direction to staff was no reduction in service. It was steady state. And it's been pointed out that we have a chronic reduction in service that we haven't addressed for, what is that now, 8 years? So I'm supportive of that. But so with Councillor McIsaac's proposed full 1% to reserves, are already underfunded reserves. I'm looking at this table on, and forgive me, it's in the report about, it currently shows with all that in the GIS student included, we go from 7.17 to 7.49. Is that correct, Mr. Burden? As a potential increase?
7.17 to 7.448, I think. It's an extra 0.29. Yeah.
29.
Oh, so to 7.46.
46, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually I had that written down here. I apologize. Okay. Oh, sorry, Councillor Shoesmith.
No worries, Mayor Milligan. I only had my hand up a fraction of a second. Funnily enough, I was actually considering proposing a 1% increase all last week Councillor McIsaac's stolen my thunder, although I was planning on splitting it between the potholes and the reserves, actually. As somebody who's voted against budget in the past, my purpose with that, it's not to stick a stick in the spokes of the bicycle. It's because I see the challenges that face our city, and they're large, and they're going to be expensive, and the taxpayer will regrettably wind up footing most of that bill. I feel it is imperative upon us, i.e. council, as well as staff, the organization as a whole, that people see us as not being spendthrift, and that they see our budget process as being transparent as possible, and that they see us as being, at least relative to other governments, lean, because that pill is a lot easier to swallow that way. I still have my issues with this. I mean, would love to see us overhauling user fees, short-term rental fees, DCCs. These are all areas I feel we really need to address. Remuneration from the RDEK, particularly for fire. And I still have problems with all those things as they currently stand. That being said, I do feel this budget is actually very transparent. And while I won't really ever use the word lean to describe a municipality, I think the city has moved in a lot of ways in the right direction. However, going forward with this, I would actually like to see that pothole program happen. I think there's almost nobody anywhere in Fernie who would go, "Oh, you spent on potholes," and be upset about it. In any case, I've never been opposed to shoring up our reserves. I'm very cognizant of the fact that they are inadequate. My issue, when I have one, is more along the lines that people need to see us as a lean, well-functioning machine that is deserving of their money.
Thank you for that perspective. Councillor Artie Kelly.
Thanks, Councillor Shoesmith, because you've really articulated a lot for how it's been for me as well. I kind of like to bring up the point, CFO, that we would have been approximately around 2.84 had we not had to use the COVID restart money. Is that right? So I just want to demonstrate that I do feel to folks, I think we've been really transparent. I think we've offered a lot of opportunities. I got to tell you, I was a little bit sad that more people didn't come to the budget open house. And I don't say that in a bad any one way. It's just, I really, really value what the community has to say. And I wish they would say more. I don't know how else to phrase that, but I want to say that I do think there were steps taken to really improve the whole process. And we would have actually been even below what our inflation rate is, because I think there's also confusion about CPI versus what the inflation rate is that we face as an organization. Could you kind of like highlight that a little?
Sure. First of all, thanks for your comments on the process. Without that COVID restart deferral, it would be 2.96. I think 2.84 was an older version. And that, what goes into that is that our expenses went up by about 4% this year. 2 years ago, it was close to 14%. So it is definitely trending in the right direction, although there's a few unknowns in the world today that, hopefully doesn't go back the other way. But time will tell on that. So, if it keeps going in this direction, then I would expect next year tax increases to start coming down again, back to, pre-COVID, just based on where our costs are trending. And that's not like that's just the trend. That's not a promise.
Well, you don't have a crystal ball. I mean, none of us has a crystal ball, and
That was a great way to qualify.
the
it.
world's
Thank
a
you.
little bit scary right now with the
Yeah.
tariffs and all those other things, right?
And then back to your other question about borrowing versus funding our reserves appropriately. It's easy enough to do that math. You project it out, like similar to how I did those other spreadsheets for council, like the borrowing spreadsheet. And it would factor in things like the amount we earned on contributing to reserves and then inflation and time value of money and all that stuff. But it also, it's kind of a loaded question, and I'm going to try not to be rambly as I was the first time I tried to answer it. But, you know, it very much depends on council's overall philosophy on taxation and funding reserves, whether we are taxing taxpayers now or taxing people in the future, and I think there's some real world examples now of maybe relying too much in the future. And I said this at a previous meeting, it's easy to stand here and point fingers at councils from 30, 40 years ago. You know, it's hard to know what we would have done, but certainly we're feeling it. And I think that's why we're having this discussion. So there's a philosophy question there. And also there's risks to relying on math like that. You know, there is a limit on how much we can borrow. So if we rely too much on borrowing and then 10 years from now, we're over that limit, then we won't be able to borrow and we won't have money. So that's a risk. And that's kind of my general thoughts on that. But I will try to put together a spreadsheet with some estimates on current rates and things like that.
Councillor Susan?
You heard it over there first, folks. It could be worse. Yeah, I suppose it kind of comes down to time preference, really. I mean, if your time horizon's long enough, paying the tax up front can be minuscule and be worth quite a lot. But if your time preference is really low and you're only looking 2-3 years, you know, the borrowing doesn't look so bad.
Other comments from council? So, Councillor Audrey Kelly?
Just going back to Councillor Nixon's idea, what would that do to the tax rate if we did take like the money from the mine tax sharing and put that away versus?
Thanks, Councillor Audrey Kelly. If it was this year, it would be an extra 1.12. Because the increase to that agreement was about 106,000, so that equates to about 1.12%. And so if you assume similar increases of 2 to 3% on that agreement, I would say it would in the future equate to roughly a 1% tax increase every year.
Just a comment on that. Philosophically, I like Councillor Nixon's thinking, but I feel like, and maybe I'm being oversimplistic, but I feel like we need to plan for that in terms of our direction to staff for potentially next budget versus making a quick deke this round. And I'm sort of leaning toward Councillor McIsaac's suggestion of 1% for reserves this year, and let's look at that next year and look at the trend and have a real cold eyes look at what that could potentially mean for us as an organization going forward. Mr. Burden.
Thanks. And my thought in terms of direction, and Mr. Barnowski may correct me, is that when we do the budget guidelines for next year, that I would just build that into that for discussion at the time. Yeah.
Councillor McIsaac, you had your hand up?
Oh, yes, Your Worship. I mean, I agree with you as far as direction to staff and process and all that stuff. I guess my thinking was, if we capped the revenue inclusion based on last year's rate for the mine tax revenue sharing at last year, that would be for this year the 1% increase.
Right.
The math was more or less the same. Is all I was getting at. Yeah. But I agree with you. I'd rather see that as a process with a proper discussion and back and forth with the CFO and all that stuff before you do that.
Thank you. So I'm looking for a motion if someone's willing to advance a motion, recognizing that this is not our final discussion on the tax rate. Councillor Hamilton.
Thanks. I will put forward a motion that we set the, I don't have it in front of me, actually. Lost the page, but that we set it at 1% increase to reserves, 0.37% for patching of roads, and somebody help me with the other number.
7.46.
Okay, 7.46
Overall.
is the overall tax increase.
Just look to our CFO to make sure he's nodding.
Yeah, the 7.17, that's on page 97 of your report, plus the extra 0.29 to make that an even 1% equals 7.46.
Would you mind reading the entire recommendation?
Your Worship and Council, the staff recommendation is that staff be directed to prepare a draft 2025 general fund operating budget to include a property taxation revenue increase of 7.46%, and that staff prepare the draft budget and financial plan for consideration by council on March 11, 2025.
Moved by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor McIsaac. Any further discussion? Councillor Nixon and then Councillor Shoesmith.
Just curious, I know Mr. Burdett is very smart. What would that be for per household based upon the 924?
Just 30 seconds, please.
Yeah, please. Yeah. Don't rush it.
Yeah, 211. Yeah.
Councillor Shoesmith.
This grudgingly has my support. I feel remiss that nobody's here to say that the money's better in people's pockets. So I will say that we are taking this from people's pockets. We should always be cognizant of that fact. That $200 could be somebody's car repair, set of tires, something important to them. And we're taking that. However, begrudgingly, I'll be in favor.
Thank you, Councillor Shoesmith. And I appreciate you raising it in that way because it's important to remind our community that that actually makes up a tenet of our strategic plan, that we are aware and cognizant that the money we spend comes largely from the pockets of our residents. So I appreciate that reminder. With that, all those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. Great discussion, everybody. Thank you. I know these are not easy decisions and they are often not popular. This is becoming a bit of a problem. Councillor McIsaac.
I'm glad I didn't promise I wouldn't do that anymore. I appreciate the where we've gone with that. I support it completely, but I also want to make sure that we don't lose in our follow-up discussion all the points that Councillor Shoesmith said earlier, because while we're not going to be able to implement a bunch of those things in time for the budget this year, the real wins for us for cost savings for the community happen over the course of the whole year. It's not now budget time. The budget is the result of the decisions we made last year and the years before. So this is what got us here. This is the answer to the question. So, you know, I think I agree. We need to look at user fees. We need to look at RDK remuneration, all those types of things. So let's not drop those. Let's make sure they're in our discussion.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I know that very shortly we're going to get a review of STR fees report to council, and those are opportunities to increase our revenue stream. So I think we really, very true. And thank you for that reminder. And thank you, Councillor Shoesmith, for raising that. Councillor Artie Kelly.
Yeah, I'd like to echo, I'm going to add the pain because it pains me and this tax rate pains me. It does. It makes me worry about people a lot. Like it almost makes me cry, but we also have to do sometimes hard things for for what's right for the overall good of the community. I'd like to add some of those talks to our strategy session if we could, Your Worship. Because yeah, the things Councillor McIsaac said and Councillor Shoesmith said, very true. Other sources of revenue expand. I know we can't expand our boundaries by March 11th, too bad, but you know, if we talk about long-term strategy, I'd like to have those chats.
100% agree.
And I do want to say thanks to the community again for, you know, putting their faith in us. And I'm sure there'll be some disappointment, but hopefully this is the overall good.
Thank you. And I want to say thanks to staff, because this has been the most rigorous budgeting process so far. And we have really dug into a lot of things, and you'll forgive the analogy, opened the kimono in ways that we haven't in the past. And I think we've got, you know, as somebody is, a couple of folks have said how transparent this has been. It's been very, very helpful and eye-opening in some circumstances. So thanks for all the work that you've all put into it. It's very much appreciated. Councillor Nixon.
Just one last thing. Thank you, Worship. And we need to keep on advocating to the higher levels of government. Right?
So
we need
true.
to keep on
Yeah.
talking to FCM and UBCM, and we need that. This current system does not work, right? Where we are sitting in the community and we're raising the taxes for our neighbors and for ourselves,
Mhm.
Yeah.
right? It doesn't work. So I think we really need to look at continued advocacy at this level. So
100% agree. Thank you. And thank you, everybody. Now, the only thing we have left on the agenda is council reports. We are running very tight on time. I will look around the room. Does anybody have something they're dying to talk about? Councillor Isaac?
I certainly wouldn't use the word dying to report on, but I do think it's worth mentioning. In my new role as the president of AKBLG, I also now am sitting on the board of UBCM.
Mhm.
And so I had my first attendance at a UBCM board meeting last week. And I was very impressed with the breadth of items that are covered, the thoughtfulness of the people sitting at the table. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I'm learning lots.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else? We have a bit of time. Councillor Audie Kelly?
Thanks, Your Worship. I just wanted to mention, for those who may not know, Fernie Tourism has been selected as a finalist in the Destination Management Marketing Organization of the Year. And the director, Yika Georgi, has been nominated as Tourism Woman of the Year. So I think that's super exciting. And I believe it's March 5th or 6th is their event. And fingers crossed. But I think, you know, it's an honor to be nominated, and I think it just goes to show the good work that they are doing. And Your Worship, you mentioned about, you know, the kindness and our strategic values, that we do know that the dollars come from fellow citizens, friends, family, staff, council, everyone. So, you know, we want people to be able to enjoy life in the community and to thrive, right? And we don't want to overly burden people. I just hope people realize that. And I'm wearing pink tonight because obviously the council's tonight and not tomorrow. And I just wanted to say that kindness doesn't cost anything, but it pays a lot of dividends. So I hope everybody has a good day tomorrow and thinks about that. Thank you.
Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. Just super quick, had my board meeting with the library last night. A couple items to just remind the community about. There's another booked event coming up April 3rd with Kevin Chong. Their AGM is actually March 31st, and it's open to the public for anybody interested in that. And lastly, they're starting a new program for, I've got tweens written here, and on my screen it says young teens. So 12 to 15-year-olds, a new book club starting Thursday nights for anybody who's got individuals in their family of that age that might be
Excellent.
interested.
Thank you. Councillor Nixon.
thank you, Worship. So I was in Grand Forks on the weekend, It's not about DOS. I was in Grand Forks on the weekend with the senior boys basketball team, the Fernie Falcons, and they won the zones. So they're going off to
Excellent.
provincials next week. Tune in to the FSS YouTube sports channel. So
Yeah.
we have a little thing set up. You can listen to some witty banter amongst a couple dads. And so we'll be there at zones next week, and we'll be at the Grizz parade on Friday with the basketball team.
Excellent. Councillor Shoesmith.
Thanks, Mayor Milligan. Not a ton to report. Just want to acknowledge that I guess I hate failing pipes and crumbling infrastructure more than high taxes. And our nice works guys are out there in the wee hours chipping away the manholes in the rain and the snow. And, I think they're doing a pretty good job of that. Lake Shoesmith is half the size it used to be. So thanks, guys.
Do they actually spray your house when they go through that puddle?
Yeah, I actually have to chip my car off. If I leave it parked there too long, the ice builds up and it shocks are going to go.
Well, it would be very much appreciated then. I don't have anything additional to report except to remind folks that our first Council Cafe of March is on Monday, the 3rd. So please join us here at the Senior Center. With that, we will call this meeting adjourned and thank everybody for joining us this evening.